If I have to see one more top 10 cornerbacks list out there without Christian Gonzalez's name on it, I'm going to lose my shit. Welcome in, everybody, to the reveal of the number 27 team in my power rankings heading into the 2025 NFL season. Today, we take a deep dive into the New England Patriots, who have a big year ahead, bringing in Mike Vrabel, the big-name head coach with a proven track record that really for a couple of years feels like that's been their sort of secret lover that they've wanted to get with, while Grandpa Bill Belichick had arranged their marriage with Jerod Mayo, but plenty of expectations for what Vrabel can do for this football team, and then a big year two as well for Drake May. Not going to be the end-all, be-all in what he's going to be as a finished product, but a big year to see what his development can look like in his second season, and hopefully, as we'll talk about here today, with some much better weapons and protection and maybe even play calling around him. We'll get into all of that and much more here in this video. As we get started though, if you enjoy this series or this video, if you could take just a second to hit that like button down below. A lot goes into these videos, so I really appreciate you just taking a moment to do that. It really does help. It pushes this video out to other Patriots fans and NFL diehards just like you. Also, do make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of these deep dives heading your way throughout the next couple of months. And then we do have a guest interview, Andre Weingarten, joining us for the Patriots Deep Dive for another year here, former Madden ratings guy and an NFL scout. Always great to get Andre's insight on the Patriots, so do not go anywhere for that interview towards the end. And then just real quick housekeeping for the podcast listeners out there. We hit that 1,000 review goal. Thank you so much for dropping those reviews on Spotify. I'm going to be doing my merchandise giveaway for those 2 free That Franchise Guy hoodies. The best way for me to do that giveaway is through Twitter, so I've pinned the post. I need you guys to post your screenshots of your reviews, and then in like a week or so, I'm going to randomly select a few of those lucky reviewers to win those hoodies. I want to give it some time so you guys can get those into the comments on that tweet there. But let's go ahead and get started, as always, taking a look at the team's offseason changes, where they got better, where they got worse, where they may have stayed the same, and that begins with the coaching staff. And for me, this Patriots team massively upgraded their coaching staff. We'll have lots to kind of rave about with them landing Mike Vrabel as the head coach here. But beyond that, you know, the Jerod Mayo era was, of course, short-lived, and just wasn't a whole lot to write home about there. So I think most people will agree this was a slam dunk hire for the Patriots. They got it done very quickly in the hiring cycle for a reason. I don't think the Patriots were the only team interested in hiring Mike Vrabel. So I say massively upgraded with that coaching staff. Then as you go through the offensive roster, quarterbacks staying neutral. They're changing backup quarterbacks. You know, you could argue slightly downgraded with the backup quarterback. That's pretty inconsequential. And by the way, by community request, I have color-coded some of these additions and losses. You guys will have to give me feedback if you enjoy this format that we're going with here for this deep dive here, and hopefully beyond if you guys like it. But the white-coated players are basically going to be unsubstantial changes to the roster, and that's basically what I see here with this quarterback room. Going from Jacoby Brissett as the backup to Joshua Dobbs, and then they did trade off Joe Milton. They got a pick for him. He's kind of Dallas's project now, as New England focuses on Drake May. But ultimately, I decided to just leave that neutral. This is all about Drake May's season here. At running back, definitely upgraded. They spend that high second-round pick on Travion Henderson and didn't really lose anybody there, so clear upgrades in the backfield. At tight end, no change, staying neutral. At wide receiver, definitely got to put this as upgraded. All they're losing is KJ Osborne, who was a complete non-factor for them last year, and they add Stephon Diggs coming off of the ACL injury. Third-round pick on Kyle Williams, and then they also add Mac Hollins. big-bodied wide receiver who can play a little bit. So pretty clear upgrades at wide receiver. And then really the big one here, the offensive line, getting that big purple-coated, massively upgraded staple, just like we did with the coaching staff, really reserving this for maybe the 10 or 15 units around the league that saw the largest upgrades from what they had last year to what they'll have this year. And I think that absolutely applies to the Patriots offensive line that was horrible to begin with last season, and their only losses really are Michael Jordan, who was actually released in December last season, but he did play 63% of their snaps last year, shows you kind of where they were at with this offensive line. And then David Andrews not back with the team after, again, not being able to stay healthy, just 18% snaps played from Andrews. But really 5 new players brought into this room, 3 of which are expected to start. Will Campbell, the 4th overall draft pick out of LSU. Morgan Moses, 34-year-old veteran right tackle. And Garrett Bradbury at center. And then they also draft Jared Wilson in the 3rd round and a 7th round pick on Marcus Bryant. So probably 5 new bodies expected to make the team there. And again, a massively upgraded unit that we will talk more about in the roster breakdown portion of the video. But let's look at the Patriots defense that, man, even though this team was certainly focused on giving Drake May more help, they really got better at every position group on defense as well. This team had a lot of money to spend, and a lot of the free agent money went towards Mike Vrabel's defense here, whereas the draft was more of the focus for the offense outside of Stephon Diggs and a couple of cheaper offensive linemen. But that begins with the big money free agent addition of Milton Williams, one of, if not the highest paid free agent in this cycle. I think he was the highest paid free agent. And I know I tried to set it up that massively upgraded tag in this portion of the video is to be used sparingly, but I think it applies to the interior of the defensive line on the Patriots as well, because not only do you get that big money, the biggest money free agent in Milton Williams, but they also are hoping to get Christian Barmore, one of the best players on this team, kind of back and ready to go after he essentially missed last season with blood clots. He came back late last season, was a complete non-factor, just 11% of the team's final snaps, and then they even spent a 4th round pick on a nice player in Joshua Farmer. Compare that to their losses of Devon Godshaw that this team pretty willingly traded away as a rotational run defender, and Daniel Ekwale, who goes to Pittsburgh. Both those guys played a good bit, but definitely one of the bigger upgraded units in the league is going to be this Patriots defensive line, especially from a pass rushing perspective on the inside of that unit. But then you turn to the edge room, and I said slightly upgraded here, and Patriots fans won't like that because they did give Harold Landry a very healthy contract, like 3 years, about $50 million. To me, and we'll talk about Landry more later on, but certainly not worth everything they paid him. He's a good run defender, but was literally the least efficient pass rusher in all of football last season. I certainly would not have paid him what they did. I don't think he's going to make the impact that Patriots fans are hoping for. But then they did bring in K'Lavon Chaisson, who just might be a better pass rusher than Harold Landry, if not the run defender that Landry is. They are a couple of bodies that will play here that they didn't really have last year. You know, Dietrich Wise is winding down his career. He only played 37% of the team snaps last year. So I will still say slightly upgraded with that edge group, but I'll admit they still have room to go with that position group. At linebacker, upgraded as well. They bring in Robert Spillane, who's coming off a couple of excellent seasons with the Raiders. Was very surprised the Raiders didn't retain him. So Spillane gets a nice kind of, market starting, quality starting level contract, about 3 years, $33 million. They also bring in Jack Gibbons, who I think was one of Vrabel's guys out there in Tennessee. And then their losses include Sion Takitaki, who hardly played for this team last year. Believe he left with injury, and Raekwon McMillan as well. So again, upgraded at linebacker, upgraded at cornerback. They spend money on Carlton Davis as a CB2. They do lose Jonathan Jones, who, he's getting up there in age. He can still play a little bit, but I do think Carlton Davis is an upgrade there. And then Marco Wilson no longer with the team as they fill in some of the depth there with a 7th-round rookie in Kobe Minor. But I do say upgraded, like the Carlton Davis signing, quite a lot. At safety, I say slightly upgraded, mostly because of returning guys for injury and in the case of Jabril Peppers' suspension. I didn't list Kyle Duggar because he did technically play for this team last year as well, but you could certainly consider that here. Kyle Duggar clearly was playing injured last season and had probably the worst year of his career. But Jabril Peppers went through an off-field situation last year that frankly I don't know too much about, but they are expecting him to be back in full swing. So that's a big addition, getting him back on the field, but they also brought in Marcus Epps and spent a 4th-round pick on Craig Woodson out of Cal. It's actually a very crowded safety room right now that we'll talk about, but slightly upgraded for me, mostly just getting a full season of Jabril Peppers, hopefully as opposed to a quarter or a third of a season there. And then the special teams, making a change at kicker, moving on from Joey Sly, and bringing in the rookie, Andy Borregales, who was really a stud at Miami, so no reason to be pessimistic about that. But Joey Sly had some good moments for this team, so really to be determined with the special teams unit. Ultimately, though, a really good offseason for a Patriots front office that I did head into this offseason with some question marks about. And there's still some nitpicks I have. I certainly would have given Harold Landry the money that they did, and we'll talk about the Will Campbell pick. I would have argued for Tet McMillan in that war room. We'll obviously see how that all plays out. But on a macro outlook at this offseason, it is one of the better offseasons in terms of a team just getting a lot better on paper. And I know a lot of Patriots fans are going to say, well, yeah, I mean, they made as many improvements as anybody in the league. How the hell is this team the 27th team in the league? You got to remember, every team does get better for the most part in the offseason this year, pretty much with the exception of the New Orleans Saints, but even them, you could argue, got better in some spots at least. But that is the point of the offseason, is to get better. And I think you can make a strong case that the Patriots were the worst team in football last year. I know they picked 3rd in the draft, but a Week 18 win against Buffalo's backups, I think, swung that. For the majority of last season, the Patriots were really by the eye test the worst team in football. So this is a good offseason to hopefully make up a lot of that ground and some, as you hope to see them climb above this 27th ranking as the season goes on. I always like to remind people that these rankings are as we head into week 1, not necessarily where I'm betting them to finish the season. But with that said, let's break down this new look coaching staff, or not so new look coaching staff in the case of these hires, because at least in the case of Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels, some pretty familiar faces for Patriots fans. Vrabel's someone that played for the Patriots. Josh McDaniels making his 3rd stint here as the Patriots offensive coordinator. So the more things change, the more things stay the same in New England, as they they like what they got from Bill Belichick, to say the least, and can't really blame them for trying to kind of recreate that magic to an extent. But regardless of the Belichick ties, Vrabel was going to be a great land for anybody. And to really make the move to make this happen was a big win, I think, for this Patriots organization. And, I do feel bad for Gerard Mayo. It feels like he kind of got the short end of the stick out of all of this. Ownership never really felt committed to him, and in most situations, he probably would have gotten a second year with a more talented, less injured football team ahead into his second season. But I also can't really blame the Patriots for looking at Mike Vrabel, knowing what he is, what he accomplished in Tennessee, and saying, we got to make this happen. And they did. Like, as soon as they were able to, they got him signed and got their offseason started very quickly under Mike Vrabel's command, basically. And I just think really highly of him as a coach. Like, I've got him resuming basically his ranking where he would have left off in Tennessee, more or less, as a top 10 head coach in the league. I've got him ranked right there as the 10th head coach for this series. And he really gives you kind of the best of both worlds in that he he is a culture builder and establishes toughness, but he also is kind of a defensive guru, defensive mastermind in many ways as well. So he gives you a lot of that, but I do think just from a culture aspect, this is going to be great to get Mike Vrabel in the door. Like what he did with those Titans teams that were always just hard-nosed, found ways to win, exceeded expectations year in, year out. It was really just impressive work. And some of those Titans teams were bottom half rosters in the league, and even a couple of those years that were riddled with injuries were arguably like bottom 8 roster talents in the league. And Vrabel, one of those years, got the 1 seed in the AFC. So like he really is able to unite a football team, not just in terms of like team chemistry and toughness and all that stuff, but I think, putting together a staff and a game plan and kind of understanding how his football team is going to be able to squeeze out wins when they need to squeeze out wins. And he got that from Bill Belichick, you got to think, right? Because some of those Belichick teams had to adapt and find ways to just milk wins out. And there's a lot of that in Mike Vrabel. So he gets a lot of respect for that. And again, ranking as my 10th head coach, but the Patriots at large, when you look at their overall coach and culture grade, they do come in 19th to 22nd for me, because it's not that evaluation is not just Mike Vrabel. That is for the team at large, and this team is still going to have to build that chemistry and find that identity as a team and find out how to win football games together to earn that benefit of the doubt that is essentially that coach and culture grade that I give these teams. But there is, of course, plenty of evidence and reason to believe that Mike Vrabel, maybe as soon as by the end of this season or into next season, can kind of get all of that going here in New England. So it's an exciting hire from that perspective. And that alone, like, that makes you a good head coach. Like that, for example, the ability to kind of raise the floor of a team and establish a tough winning culture. That's like, for example, what the Raiders are looking for in hiring a Pete Carroll. So if that's all Mike Vrabel was able to do for this Patriots team that has kind of lost their way, that would be great. But like I said, he brings you the best of both worlds. He can set that culture and raise the floor and establish toughness in your locker room. But he's also, I would say, he qualifies as a sort of scheme lord or a defensive guru. And I've said this already in this series, and I've said it time and time again in the past. If you're going to hire a defensive-minded head coach, he damn well better be at least a top 10 defensive mind in the league, because there's plenty of great defensive coordinators out there to be hired. If you want to go with an offensive-minded head coach, I don't need to continuously go down this path in every single deep dive, but there is a bit of an opportunity cost when you hire a defensive-minded head coach because of the risk of losing your offensive mind or not landing a great offensive mind in this offensive league. So if you're going to get the defensive head coach, I would really prefer that he is maybe a DeMeco Ryans, or what Bill Belichick was for all those years, or what Mike Vrabel was in Tennessee, where you do view him as one of the top premium defensive minds in the league who can genuinely elevate a defense towards success. You can take a bad defensive roster and have a solid defense. You can take a solid roster and make them a great defense, and hopefully you can take a great roster and make them an elite defense. And I do think Mike Vrabel is capable of doing that at all three of those levels. Like I said, what he did with some of those Titans defenses and teams was incredibly impressive to me. Teams that I consistently, came in too low on and bet against and was wrong to see those defenses have success year in, year out. It was, for many years, it was essentially just kind of like Jeffrey Simmons and the boys out there, and they were pretty much every year a top 10 defense, and that was really impressive. And I think the reason he's able to do that is a lot of that kind of Belichick background. He really is kind of a young Bill Belichick, maybe not quite to the extent of defensive genius, but very similar, not just with the schematic plays and the terminology and all that stuff, but more on a macro level, what always made Belichick so special was the ability to adapt, remold and reshape his defense year to year or even week to week to come up with different game plans based on, what his personnel was, who he had healthy that week, as well as who he's going against, what the opposing offense is good at, and what he can do to counter that type of stuff. And Mike Vrabel is excellent in that sense. His defenses are very flexible, very multiple, and it takes someone that can coach players to understand their assignments and their jobs if you're going to be so multiple, because not every coach can put that much on their players' plates and expect them to handle it. Mike Vrabel has shown that he can, but it takes a smart defensive mind as well to be able to pick and choose your spots like that. And again, Vrabel has proven that he can do that. And with that, the Patriots come in with really favorable defensive coaching rankings for me. From a run defense perspective, I actually already have the Patriots tied for first with two other teams. That also ties into Terrell Williams, who's their defensive coordinator. I'll talk about a little bit more about him in a second, but really like how this team is going to be able to coach the run, as Vrabel always did in Tennessee. And then from a pass defense perspective, I'm not going to say I have hesitation with Mike Vrabel. They still rank 7th to 12th for pass defense coaching. But that is where I would say maybe Vrabel hasn't quite proven to be a Bill Belichick level scheme lord. I think they had good pass defenses in Tennessee, but maybe never great. That's maybe an area that I think Vrabel and, beyond Vrabel, this staff and this organization are going to have a little bit of room to improve, but still excellent rankings there. Put those together, and that's really one of the best defensive coaches in the entire league that the Patriots are bringing in here. We can spend a little bit more time talking about Vrabel's scheme. I've alluded to it a little bit already, but it is a very, very multiple, adjustable scheme. He does, of course, come from the sort of Belichick background, even the Romeo Crennel background, where at the core, there's a lot of 3-4 principles that, these coaches in this coaching tree have always loved, especially to have more of a 3-4 style front with stand-up edge rushers that you can do a little bit more with in terms of dropping into coverage and confusing teams with blitz schemes and stuff. There is always going to be an element of, the role of that really hybrid edge outside linebacker as a core philosophy in a Mike Vrabel, Bill Belichick defense. But beyond that, he's not beholden to one specific front. Like, he's going to coach this defense to run odd fronts, even fronts, base 3-4, a 3-3-5, kind of 5-1 penny front. I would imagine some weeks we'll see some of that. We might see 6-1 fronts against heavier offensive personnel. It's all going to be in the bag for a Mike Vrabel defense. And a part of that, too, is like you can start to tie in Terrell Williams, too, who has been under Mike Vrabel for a long time in Tennessee for 5 years. But Williams did just spend a year in Detroit under Aaron Glenn, and that defensive front was damn near identical in the sense of you didn't really know heading into the matchup any given week, like what sort of fronts that Lions defense is and was going to throw at you. It's very similar with a Mike Vrabel defense. So they're very much an attacking multiple front. And then on the back end, likewise, we've hinted at it, but Mike Vrabel is going to cater to who his personnel is and what his matchup is any given week. If he knows he's got to run a lot of quarters one week, play top down and prevent big plays, he can do that. If he wants to play press man, physical man coverage, he absolutely will do that. If he's got a quarterback that he wants to blitz a ton, he will light you up. He is going to adapt in the best of ways. I will say this, in his heart of hearts, there's two things that Mike Vrabel at the end of the season wants to look back and say, I did a lot of that relative to the rest of the league, and that would be fire zone blitzes. I think he loves to kind of vary his fronts. Like I mentioned, have those kind of multiple edge rushers that can rush the passer, but also can be legit effective dropping into zone coverage. That's a core element of fire zone blitzes, but he'll drop defensive tackles and mugged up linebackers if he needs to as well. But he definitely wants to run a lot of zone blitzes. And if he has the bodies to do it, which I think he prefers to have the bodies to do it. He wants to run a lot of man coverage as well. We didn't get to see a ton of that in Tennessee because they just never had great corners. I think this might be the top Mike Vrabel defense in terms of cornerbacks and man coverage run, as long as that group is healthy. So again, just think multiple, think adaptable, and smart, physical, aggressive defense. Just like Patriots fans have known and love for 2 decades in New England. And then you turn things over to the offense and essentially your offensive head coach in Josh McDaniels, a man that needs absolutely no introduction for Patriots fans, has 6 Super Bowl rings from this Patriots team, 3 of which he was the offensive coordinator for, and this is his 3rd stint as an offensive coordinator here. This has to be a record for a coach to have 3 different stints as a coordinator for a team before they turn 50. But Josh McDaniels gets a bad rap because he's failed as a head coach multiple times, and even some of those Patriots offenses that were really lacking in talent. There were some moments where Patriots fans, I think, got tired of Josh McDaniels. But for the most part, I think this is a good hire. I think he's obviously got the experience, but he has just this massive Rolodex of answers to different problems the defenses will throw at him. He's got plenty of experience calling plays, and I think he is a good offensive coordinator, always has been, always was elevated, of course, by having Tom Brady next to him as well. But there is a side of this where if you are going to hire a defensive head coach, your options for your offensive coordinator are always going to be a bit more limited. And I think Josh McDaniels is about as damn qualified as a true offensive coordinator hire as you will find. And the nice thing is here is it does remind me a little bit of like the flip side of things with, maybe like a Steve Spagnuolo, or I think what we're setting up to see with Vic Fangio in Philadelphia, where you have the guy that's been a head coach that really has no interest in being a head coach again and is happy to coach his side of the ball and can really establish that continuity with his players, maybe even more importantly with the scouting department so that they know exactly what types of skill sets you're looking for. And having that continuity can really set you up for long-term success. And nobody in the right mind is going to give Josh McDaniels, I think, a 3rd head coach opportunity here in his 50s. So even if he's never this like masterful scheme lord, I do think he knows his stuff, knows how to call plays, and is going to be a stable force in this coaching staff for an extended period of time here now in New England, just like he had that long run after his first head coaching job with Denver. Now, I don't rank him like super, super high. He gets B- grades across the board for pass game and run game coaching, which puts them smack dab in the middle of the league, really, 14th to 22nd for pass game and 17th to 18th for run game coaching. I don't think Josh McDaniels comes without his criticisms, right? Like, the problem with him is he hasn't shown that he can fully adapt his very much traditional pro-style approach to offense. He hasn't fully evolved with a lot of the modern principles that are having so much success in the league today. Things like RPOs and the wide zone run game and even a heavier dose of play action. All of that good stuff that these young offensive minds are having so much success with. That is an area where you would love to see Josh McDaniels bring a little bit more to the table. And there is at least some reason to believe that he's opening his mind to doing that. This team has really told us with all of their moves and some of the stuff coming out of camp early that this is going to be a pretty wide zone heavy run game, which that alone is very different to what Josh McDaniels has done in the past. Sounds like he's even discussed like wanting to change a little bit of what he does and adapt more to the modern style. And if that's the case, maybe we do see a second era of Josh McDaniels offense that doesn't necessarily look like the Tom Brady offenses that can climb in these coaching rankings a little bit, to the fact that you do feel like you have maybe more of a top half of the league play caller here in Josh McDaniels. Right now, I would say he's kind of a intermediate, solid offensive coordinator and a good hire again in the sense that you're very unlikely to lose him like so many other offensive coordinators that, other teams have their eyes on as head coach candidates. Schematically speaking, we've hinted at some of it, but he is very much at this point in time, a classic pro-style coach. A lot of under center. You think of that like option passing game where you've got the slot wide receiver and the running back kind of running those two-way go routes or option routes really, where they're reading the leverage of either the zone coverage or the linebackers, and they have routes that could branch off into any variety of different breaks. And then you want the quarterback to be able to, understand all of those complex rules and know where the backs and slot wide receivers and everybody's going to go based on the coverage. All these like kind of hard to grasp pro style concepts that Tom Brady could handle. Well, it's hard to find a quarterback that can handle that. So a young Drake May, frankly, I think Drake May maybe someday can do some of that stuff, but you probably want to dumb down the offense a little bit for Drake May. And I do think that getting into some of the wide zone play action, very much like Shanahan-inspired principles, which, again, that's all of the talk right now, is that's what they want to do more of. Getting into that does really simplify things for the quarterback, and it helps you from a pass protection standpoint, because running that wide zone play action gets defensive linemen running east and west off the snap instead of getting after the quarterback right away north and south. So it does seem that that's the direction they want to go, is kind of, maybe tune down the playbook a little bit, at least for now. 3-4 years down the road, like those offenses can be really dynamic and tough to stop if everybody's on the same page, and maybe they can get there in time. But I think it would be smart to tune things down a little bit. And then in time, maybe you can really add the multiplicity of a Josh McDaniels offense that wouldn't just be a heavy dose of wide zone run game, but a lot of those north and south run games that the Patriots always had, with a lot of power and counter and kind of smash mouth at you run game with a fullback and all that good stuff. They do employ a fullback here, so I don't think that's all going to just go away. But it does seem like we're going to get a little bit of a hybrid, at least, of the old Josh McDaniels and a new version. And only time will tell, really, of how much success they're going to have with that. But we can wrap up this segment, very optimistic outlook, obviously, on this staff. I think they have all of the bones, all of the pieces to be one of the better coaching staffs in the league and really have an extended run of success with this staff in this organization. But let's now turn our attention to the roster and begin that breakdown with the quarterback room and Drake May, where heading into this season, I have the Patriots ranked 24th at the quarterback position. And obviously the expectation and the hope is that by maybe not even the end of the season, but by week 5, week 6, we're feeling good saying, yeah, they're much better than 24th at quarterback. But needless to say, coming out of his rookie season where he only started about half of the games, he ended up playing about 2/3 of the team's total snaps at quarterback. But coming out of that rookie season, he still has a lot to prove and room to grow as a young player. But I will say this, just in a vacuum, in a neutral assessment of Drake May, I would say he lived up to his expectations as a very, very highly perceived quarterback prospect in terms of how well he played as a rookie. That's in a vacuum. You then throw the context of the fact that this was a nightmare situation to throw a young quarterback into. I was legitimately worried when Drake May got put out there early that it was too soon, that it was going to overwhelm him, not having pass protection, not having receivers that he can trust or get open. And even from a play calling perspective, I don't think they really knew what they fully wanted to do quite yet when they put Drake May in. I was legit worried that he was going to be next in line of a lot of, in my opinion, good quarterback prospects that have been arguably ruined by bad situations like he was thrown into last year. And he overcame it. I don't want to say he thrived as a rookie, but he certainly didn't struggle. And again, just to get him to a point where he kind of reached his expectations as really one of the better quarterback prospects of the last 5 years. I'll just leave it at that, but he was. I think he certainly would have been the number one pick in this most recent draft and multiple other years beyond that. He ended up being the third QB in that loaded draft. But he had a season that had a lot of highs, a lot of exciting flashes of like legit NFL quarterbacking stuff, throwing backside digs, the way he improved his footwork, and when he did have clean platforms and could step into a throw, he could throw on time and play within the rhythm of his offense. But then beyond that, a part of what made him such a special prospect was the play extension ability. How explosive he is as an overall athlete, a former two-sport player, a big-time baseball player, but just a really fluid athlete for such a big guy with such a strong arm as well. He can make all the throws and awesome instincts in scramble drill. And what he was able to do in improvisational situations, in scramble drill, was really impressive stuff. I mean, he was, just off the top of my head, inside the top 8 for just, if you could make a highlight reel of quarterbacks in scramble drill making plays out of nothing, he was inside the top 8 for quarterbacks in the league last year, and probably would be a little bit higher than 8th. And compared to the other rookies in his own draft, at least throwing the football, I think he did even more in scramble drill. Again, throwing the football in scramble drill than Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams. And that's not to take away from those guys. That's to give Drake May his credit for really how special he was in those moments. So it's like, the ability to create out of nothing and the arm talent and the athleticism, there's no question that he can bring upside to the table in that sense. And to see it in his rookie season in a disastrous situation is extremely promising. For me with Drake May, it's the floor stuff. Consistently playing on time, consistently making the right reads, continuing to improve his footwork that I still think is a little bit wacky and always was coming out of North Carolina. There's some throwing off his back foot and stepping up when he doesn't need to, and still some stuff to do from a technique standpoint that should get cleaned up, right? But does need to get cleaned up. And then there are some just really head-scratching, boneheaded throws that did exist at North Carolina that followed him into his rookie season. So like there is a lower floor in some of the moments that we saw from Drake May that there's really no reason to believe that he can't continue to develop and clean up some of that stuff. And for me, it's more of a question of how many of those mistakes does he weed out, and how much does his consistency really ramp things up so that he can climb up to being one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the league. And let's just play it safe and say a tier 2 great quarterback, someone that you expect to win a Super Bowl with in a 10-year window. Like, that really is Drake May's upside. You just got to get there, because I don't think he's there yet. And I think that's totally fair. And this is obviously a very optimistic look at Drake May, as I think it should be. I will say, if there's one area of his game that might hold him back, that it's just very streaky, is the pocket presence. There are moments where he bounces around and finds room in the pocket. He has that touchdown against Tennessee, right, where he extends the play for like 12 seconds. It was a total like vintage Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, like pocket presence moment. Where he's totally feeling that space and buying as much time as possible. There's other times where he kind of steps into pressure and can kind of bail out of clean pockets at times. And, I think getting a better offensive line, which he didn't have at North Carolina and didn't have in New England, hopefully that can make it so that he's consistently doing the right stuff with his movement inside of the pocket, as opposed to being a little bit more hit or miss with some of the play extension stuff. And not just play extension, but knowing when he does need to sit in the pocket and let a route develop or take a step to the left so he has a clean platform to throw from. Like, all that good pocket presence stuff. There are some inconsistent moments there as well that I would love to see get better again with a better offensive line. But ultimately, a very optimistic outlook for Drake May, and another kind of new feature of this deep dive series here, by community request, I am putting that wild card icon on some of the biggest sort of X factors for these individual teams. We talk about that in the recap portion, but now alluding to some of these players earlier on in the videos of really the couple of core elements of the team that you're hoping can go right and really help the team exceed the ranking that I have on the team as we head into the season. But also, alluding to maybe a little bit of a floor there that could hurt the team's ability to reach their expectations. And Drake May is the definition of a wild card. If things click for him in year 2 and he has you think about like Patrick Mahomes and his second season as a starter. I'm not saying he's going to be Patrick Mahomes, but if he has something like that in year 2, all right, this team is going to be a playoff contender. If he's maybe closer to what he was last year, yeah, this 27th team ranking is going to be much closer to accurate, I think. Again, they rank 24th right now, hoping that climbs, and then it's all about Drake May. Josh Dobbs gets brought in as the backup here. You're obviously devastated if you have to watch Josh Dobbs starting football games this year. Nothing against Josh Dobbs, but it's just a very exciting season for Drake May. And certainly a big year in his development and kind of showing us what type of quarterback he can be. It's not going to be set in stone if things don't go perfectly this year, but it's definitely a big one in year 2. But let's talk about his weapons next and who he's got to throw to here. And I would say this is a group that I am much more skeptical of than I think Patriots fans would want me to be. They actually come in tied for the worst ranking for weapons in the league. But even with that said, it's a better group of weapons than Drake May had to throw to last year. So at least there's that. And you got to also remember, like, all these teams are doing a good job, I think, loading up on weaponry for their quarterbacks. I like a lot of the moves the Patriots made, but they had a lot of ground to make up here. So a C- grade for weapons, ranking 31st to 32nd. But I will say it does have a little medical check next to it there. If you could guarantee me that Stefon Diggs makes a swift and full recovery at 32 years old from an ACL injury, they probably wouldn't be the worst group of weapons in the league. But I am skeptical of it. How could you not be at that age with that injury, that he can not just come back and stay healthy, but play at the level we're used to seeing Stefon Diggs play at? Especially when, like, I think he played great in Houston last year before the injury, but you go back a year before that, he did look like he was maybe slowing down a little bit. It's a big part of why Buffalo was willing to trade him off. So Diggs, for me, gets an 82 grade with that wild card icon on him. He is next to Drake May, I think, as one of the biggest X factors that could ultimately decide the success of this team this season. And he himself gets that up and down yellow arrow where, okay, if he makes a full recovery and he can get back to the guy he was in Houston last season, he is a better player than the 82 grade that I put on him. I think he was really impressive in Houston last year, looked in better shape, was separating, making remarkable catches. I didn't think he was going to be much of a factor in that Texans passing game that had Tank Dell, that had Nico Collins. And there were weeks where he was the primary focus of that offense. And they were rolling with Diggs out there. And then Nico Collins got banged up and they were able to lean on Stefon Diggs to be their number one wide receiver. So if he can be that guy, again, at 32 years old, coming off an ACL, slam dunk signing. And I really hope he is, but needless to say, there's just no guarantee of that. How could there be? And there is a downside to this signing as well, with a guy that has been, let's just say, boisterous inside locker rooms. I don't think Diggs is a bad guy. In fact, I think he's a good leader. But when things aren't going well for Stefon Diggs, he can be one of those kind of diva-style wide receivers. So, that on top of just the fact that, all right, maybe you are funneling targets to a guy that is struggling to separate in the way that he once did because he can't quite snap off the top of his routes like he did prior to the ACL injury or when he wasn't 32 years old. Like, there is just a downside to this that needs to be, I think, factored into the entire formula here. I obviously hope he balls out. But if healthy, you got a legit kind of number one wide receiver that is awesome, especially in the short to intermediate game. And you can throw deep balls to him as well to keep defenses honest, and he can convert catches down the field as well. But where he really eats are on dig routes, crossing routes, beat and press coverage, winning on a slant, like just kind of being that go-to, get you a bucket type of wide receiver. But then beyond him, there are just so many question marks, right? Kyle Williams as a third-round rookie is probably your best hope at a legit number 2 wide receiver here. And again, there's reason to believe he could be that. I'm excited to see Kyle Williams here. This is a guy I've been totally targeting in like as many dynasty leagues as I can. I'm in like 7 of them now. So I'm definitely trying to get my hands on him. Like, I think his skill set, first and foremost as a deep threat within this offense, with Diggs kind of doing the stuff we described he can do, with Douglas and Henry and Henderson as your kind of short game weapons. Kyle Williams as a vertical threat where he's got really good release and can make tough catches down the field. And he has a second gear when he's running over under those deep balls. There were some throws from Drake May, who loves to launch it deep. He would make those throws where, like, you know, you're covered, but I'm throwing it anyway, and I'm hoping you can kind of outrun the secondary, outrun those safeties on the back end that tend to be a little bit slower. And your Keyshawn Booties and those guys just couldn't quite hit that second gear. Kyle Williams, that is maybe what stood out the most to me. It's a little inside baseball here, but for the first time ever, I was able to see the GPS tracking on these wide receivers now. And Kyle Williams stood out as a guy where he would get those vertical targets, and he's running under it. He's going from 20 to 21 to 22 miles an hour as he's running under those deep balls. That's special stuff that DBs just, they lose control at that speed down the field. So you pair that with Drake May, that's really exciting. There's a reason Darnell Mooney was my comp on Kyle Williams as kind of a really nice vertical threat out the gate. And then he can run routes. He can snap off routes. And again, he's got a release package. My holdup on Kyle Williams is the hands and the ball skills. There's a lot of concentration drops. There were some moments when he's contorting for catches and stuff where he just couldn't quite reel in some of those tougher catches. He is a smaller guy, so like contested catches probably never going to be a core part of his game. That is where if he fails, it's going to be that he is one of these vertical threats that struggles to secure the football, as there's a lot of those guys out there. So that's my main question on him. But there's plenty of reason to be excited about him, but at the same time, counting on a third-round rookie to come in and, you know, even if Diggs is healthy, to be your number 2 wide receiver, that is a lot to ask. And then if Diggs isn't back to full speed, you're putting even more pressure on Kyle Williams. But definitely excited to see him. And then you have Demario Douglas, who I've been a fan of Demario Douglas for a couple years now. I don't know that I'm necessarily putting the up arrow on Demario Douglas to say, you know, he's going to emerge as much more than how I already kind of view him as just like a really solid wide receiver 3, slot wide receiver type, someone that I do think if Josh McDaniels eventually wants to run a lot of these kind of option routes from the slot and, you know, put more on Davis now as a third-year player, kind of put more on his plate mentally to sort of read zone coverages and have more option routes and that kind of stuff, that would probably be where he has potential to be even better than what he's done so far and really be a nasty weapon in this offense. But again, I don't know how much they're going to lean into that style of offense and specifically doing that with Demario Douglas. But overall, twitchy guy. He can make some tough catches. He's got solid speed to have some verticality from the slot, especially on like deep crossing routes and stuff. So off of play action, he's good in that sense. RPO game, he can flip the ball in his hands. He's elusive. He's kind of like a slightly tuned down version of like Josh Downs for the Colts. He's a nice player. Just don't know that he's going to give you too much more than what he's done in his first couple of years, which is good production, right? He's been a nice, like, between 550 and 650 yards in his first couple of years, and that's probably about what you're going to get from him again. And then it's a motley crew of wide receivers sort of duking it out for roster spots after that. So they bring in Mac Hollins. He's probably safe as this team's wide receiver 4. Again, they sound like they want to run a lot more wide zone, presumably Shanahan concepts, more condensed formations, using that kind of 11.5 personnel, if you will, where one of your wide receivers is an extension of your tight end group. And none of these wide receivers really are that. So to go get Mac Hollins makes sense, to be kind of a flexed in blocker from the slot. And he's a good locker room presence, good special teamer. So he, I think, is safe, but he is what he is as a wide receiver 4. Then Jalen Polk. I hate to say I told you so, Patriots fans, but I kind of don't hate to say I told you so, in that this was a horrible draft pick from the beginning. Polk was, to me, kind of like a late third-round wide receiver prospect, a contested catch type of guy that just was going to have a hard time repeating what he did at Washington and carving out a high-end role at the next level, and to spend the 36th pick or whatever it was to trade down when he could have had Ladd McConkey. I mean, my goodness, did this front office screw up with that one. And I don't know how much this new coaching staff is going to come in expecting from him. There's not going to be a ton of opportunities for him to get on the field unless he really proves it. Just not really anything to see there. And they had to eventually just stop playing him because he couldn't catch anything. I think he's a savvy route runner, but he's not really this burner, high-end separator type. And for me, I mean, he's going to make this team, you would think, just because it's really tough to cut a top 40 draft pick in year two, no matter who you are and how the regime has changed. But that's pretty much the only thing giving him a roster spot at this point. So anything you get from him is house money at this point. They've done a good job to not have to count on that player, but boy, it would be nice if he could at least, catch a football and be a nice wide receiver 4 for you, maybe. Kayshon Boutte has had an admirable ascension to a wide receiver 5 that had to play a lot last season, a lot of drops, inconsistent. That's just been the story on him, frankly, going back to LSU. But if he makes some plays in camp, they might keep him around. Kendrick Bourne, they're going to kind of see what kind of shape he's in at this point in his career. Javon Baker, 4th-round pick last year. Again, a 4th-round pick that didn't show anything in his rookie season. He's going to have to show something to really make this team. He's a guy that could probably get stashed on the practice squad. I don't know how many people would be itching to pick him up. And then Efton Chisholm's going to be an undrafted rookie that a lot of people are paying attention to. Your classic white slot wide receiver Patriots type. A lot of memes with him ending up in New England. But for what it's worth, there's really nobody else here behind Demario Douglas that would act as a backup, as that true kind of route running slot wide receiver type. So maybe he just hangs around on the practice squad, but if anything did happen to Demario Douglas, he might have a role within Josh McDaniels' offense. So at least worth keeping an eye on. And that rounds out, frankly, a deep group of wide receivers. You're running 8, maybe 9 deep of names that you have to talk about. But you start stacking this group up against the other wide receiver groups in the league, and it just doesn't really compete with what a lot of other quarterbacks have to work with. And in time, they're still going to have to add to this group. And ultimately, I do beg the question of if this team should have just grabbed Tet McMillan with that 4th overall pick. Only time will tell how that take ages. And we'll talk about Will Campbell in a little bit there. But we do have to talk about the rest of the weapons here, because they do have assets beyond the wide receivers here that are going to help. Hunter Henry, one of those. You don't have to spend a lot of time on Hunter Henry. I think we all know what he is at this point. Just a classic possession tight end. He's an okay blocker, but really, he's super steady hands, good contested catch threat, smart guy, but not someone that's going to separate against man coverage really or anything like that. But he's a nice, good starting wide tight end. And then they bring back Austin Hooper so that they can run 12 personnel. He's a good tight end too. Any fan that had to watch him be their starter got tired of, kind of how stiff he is and just the lack of dynamism from him in the receiving game. But he does have good hands, and he's even a better blocker, I think, than Hunter Henry. I get why they brought him back, and he's probably going to play a good bit. They paid him a decent chunk of change, and there's no reason not to come out in 12 personnel and try to run the ball at times, especially if you're going to be a wide zone offense, which a lot of times you want to do that Shanahan-style stuff out of 12 personnel. And then Jaheim Bell as well. If they do want to get into that system, Jaheim Bell would be your kind of wing tight end that I liked coming out. I thought he should have been drafted higher than a 7th-round pick. I didn't really get on the field in his rookie year last year, but he can do some stuff with the ball in his hands. He's an instinctive receiver with a little bit of speed in there. So someone to at least keep an eye on here in year 2. And I could just be overthinking it because they had so many different holes to fill on this roster, but the fact that they didn't really bring anybody else into this tight end room as like a late round investment or a free agent pickup, kind of tells you that I think that they're comfortable kind of seeing what they can get out of Jaheim Bell here in year 2 because, yeah, Jack Westover's here, CJ Dupree, undrafted free agent out of Alabama. There's just not really anybody else. It's probably going to be a 3 tight end room, and then they have I think a rookie fullback, in Brock Lamp out of Northern Illinois will probably kind of round out their blocking specialists, which really, barring a breakout from Jaheim Bell, is really what those tight ends are there for, is the blocking first and foremost, and a secure pair of hands on the checkdowns from Hunter Henry. So not really adding too much to the group of weapons, but not hurting the floor either. They're going to do their jobs for what they ask them to do. And then with the running backs, this is an exciting running back duo. Exciting enough that this actually could prove to be a backfield that elevates the group of weapons as well. Time will tell to, see there's only a handful, like 2 or 3 running backs that are true difference makers out of the backfield in the league. And I would say Travion Henderson has a chance to be one of those guys. We'll see if he can really do that, especially as a rookie back. There's a lot of expectations that he can be that, though, right? They spent a high second-round pick. This was kind of what he did best at Ohio State, was be a pass catcher, an explosive play threat with a ton of speed. And on top of that, it's rare to get a guy that is as good at that stuff as Henderson is, that also blocks his ass off. And he has a chance to be a legitimate superstar pass-catching running back, and on all 3 downs as well. And as a rookie coming in, he does get a very favorable B+ ranking for me. Again, it is difficult for a running back to really look at a room like this and say, oh, they're fine, they can throw the ball to Travion Henderson. You know what I'm saying? It kind of makes me think of like when Green Bay had Devontae Adams and nobody else. And it was like, yeah, but they have Aaron Jones is basically their number 2 wide receiver. And then they try to use him as a number 2 wide receiver. And it's like, well, yeah, he's still just a running back. So there's only so much that a running back can do to dig out a group of weapons that does rank towards the bottom of the league. But again, Travion Henderson could prove to be a legit special difference maker, but he's got to kind of be a DeAndre Swift, Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara in his prime. Like, again, there's only a handful of those guys, so we'll see. He does have the potential in a best case scenario to be that kind of guy, though, I think, at least as a receiving back. But then you do also have Antonio Gibson, who I think will still play a pretty nice role for this Patriots team. And I don't want to dunk on the Travion Henderson pick. You can go watch my draft grades video. Like, it's not like my opinions really changed from then. It wasn't my favorite pick. But part of the reason I was like a little bit hesitant on it is that I do think Antonio Gibson played really well catching passes out of the backfield for New England last year. I think even Patriots fans could tell you, like, he had some plays last year where there was only one reaction you could have, and that was, okay, Antonio Gibson, I see you, running through tackles and having explosive moments, hitting that speed train style, showing off his athletic ability out in space. And it's like, you see those plays and you don't necessarily want to take the ball out of his hands in some of those situations, because he himself was really good. And he is under contract here for 2 more seasons, kind of on a value deal. He got a 3-year, $12 million deal last offseason. And I'll tease our guest interview, but Andre made a really good point about Josh McDaniels using pony personnel with 2 running backs. So he very much deserves to be a part of this conversation. And those 2 guys together could do some really nice stuff that frustrates defenses. It damn well might be the best or second best or certainly most unique part of this group of weapons that the Patriots can bring to the table that maybe other teams can't. So definitely worth a shout out with that unit. And then Ramondre Stevenson as well, like, he's going to be out there. He's probably the best pass. Well, that's not true. Henderson, even though he's a rookie, is probably the best pass blocker. But Henderson can pass block, and he can do some stuff as a dump down threat too. So he's in the mix there. But it's for me, it's going to be mostly about Gibson and Henderson, both catching passes. And then worth a shout out, they got Lan Larison down there too, your classic Patriots pickup, if you will. But he caught some passes at, Jesus, I don't even remember the school he played at. I'm going to be honest. I remember watching him, but I don't remember what school that was. Some small school, but yeah, he's got some hands. So I'm not going to say keep an eye on him because there's a lot of good, pass catching backs ahead of him, but you never know. That does round out this discussion with the weapons. And I think there's a world where this is enough for Drake May to hit his ceiling and really, thrive here in year two. But there's just as much, if not an even more likely world where, all right, Diggs is a little bit slower at his age coming off the injury. Kyle Williams maybe doesn't hit as a third-round rookie wide receiver with some hands issues. And you're still sitting here heading into 2026 like, we got to get some more juice out here for Drake May. I'm not saying that's definitely going to happen, but there is a risk that this group isn't good enough as well, even if the upside here on the flip side of things is there too. But this is a core group kind of quote-unquote contributing to this being the 27th overall team in this deep dive series. Like, you got a young quarterback and a very just questionable group of weapons right now, with really everything to prove, frankly. But let's go to the backfield here. It's a solid backfield. They rank 22nd to 26th for me compared to the rest of the league. And this is where I will say, I'm not quite as high on TreVeyon Henderson as a runner of the football than so many people were in the draft community, and maybe even as the Patriots were. I will say the fact that they are supposedly leaning more towards a wide zone style run game, that pick does make more sense. And the point Andre makes in our interview about pony personnel and using two running backs at the same time sold me on Henderson a little bit more here. But I do think there's a perception that this was a slam dunk draft pick, that this is TreVeyon Henderson's backfield, that he's going to be a superstar running back and all this stuff. And I would probably bet against it. I'm obviously cautious to say anything like that, but I question that he has really the frame to be this sort of, the term workhorse back has changed over the years, but even someone that would get 60% of the carries in an NFL backfield, I worry that TreVeyon not only has the frame to be durable throughout of that, as a guy that did have durability issues in college as well, but the ability to be a fully diverse running back, to do all of the different stuff, to power things up between the trenches and have the size to pick up tough yardage. I see him as much more of a big play threat RB2 type of runner, where you do want to use him on wide zone and gap and try to get him out in space and give him a lane to get moving, where he is awesome as a speed train runner, and he's physical and he's got some power to his game to break tackles out in space. I do wish he was a little bit more creative out in space, but he can certainly break tackles and bounce off guys in the second level. So I get the explosive side of things and what they're going for there 100%. But I also think there's a little bit of the Patriots maybe falling victim to something that a lot of teams have done over the history of the league, and that you're kind of chasing the hot new thing right now. You look at what Jahmyr Gibbs and Saquon Barkley did for those offenses last season, and you heard a lot of analysis of mock drafts, and when the Patriots drafted him, it's with TreVeyon Henderson, you're looking for your Jahmyr Gibbs. And I don't think he's Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't think he's all that close. He's fast, but he's not Jahmyr Gibbs fast. He's shifty, but he's not Jahmyr Gibbs shifty. That's the biggest thing with Jahmyr Gibbs, is the way he can stop and start and change directions. It's Jamal Charles-esque. It's Christian McCaffrey-esque. I don't think TreVeyon Henderson was that special in that sense. I think if you design him the right play and get him in space, he can provide explosive plays for you, kind of like Antonio Gibson can do. But the last thing I'll say about Henderson is I was really frustrated with his vision. Constantly looking for those big plays, bouncing runs outside, being hesitant to hit runs inside. Sometimes he would run inside, but he'd be a step late. And, against college competition, sometimes he still hits the hole hard and still can get 3 or 4 yards for you. But I saw a lot of DeAndre Swift type tendencies with him that really scared me, where the vision just wasn't there. I do think on wide zone it was pretty good. where he can see those cutback lanes and turn the corner with his speed. So in those, if they're going to run a lot of wide zone, I do understand that side of things. I know I sound overly pessimistic here on TreVeyon Henderson. It's just kind of how I see it. Maybe pushing back on the hype a little bit, but I also don't want to say this was just like a horrible, horrible pick. There is definitely some juice and some upside and the ability to bring some big plays, not just on the ground, but through the air as well with Henderson. But ultimately, kind of my take here is that Ramondre Stevenson is a huge fantasy football sleeper, because I do believe that he is going to get the most carries out of this backfield, and not just get the most. I think he's going to get 60 to 70% of the carries here. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but based on what I saw from TreVeyon Henderson on tape, this to me feels like a situation where, okay, as camp goes on, first couple of weeks of the season go on, all of those exciting moments you remember from Henderson at Ohio State that he maybe isn't hitting at the NFL level, because it's hard to get those explosive plays, those start to fade, and an old school coach like Josh McDaniels and Mike Vrabel, the more and more you're sitting in that meeting room and you're saying, hey, TreVeyon, the C gap was wide open. Why did you bounce that outside? The more and more of those you see in the meeting rooms, the less and less carries he's going to get. So unless he dramatically improves his vision, I do expect that the veteran Ramondre Stevenson, that's still getting paid a lot of money, they extended him early last season, remember. He is the tough throwback runner that I don't have as many vision questions about. I'm not going to say Stevenson has amazing vision, but he will get what's blocked up for you, and he will see it better than I'm expecting a young TreVeyon Henderson to. The main thing with Stevenson is, like, you got to clean up the fumbles. If he's, this could blow back in my face, in that if he's fumbling in the preseason, old school coaches, they're going to sit Stevenson's ass down and look to get out of that contract as soon as possible. So he's got to improve that ball security. But I do like to think that them drafting a second round running back after just getting paid here, I like to think that that will light a bit of a fire under Ramondre Stevenson's ass. And when he is motivated and when he is kind of, fresh and running hard, he is a stud. And they paid him right around that time, in the early part of last season, when he was running through defenses. I mean, he was a core part of this team beating the Bengals week 1. He is one of the hardest running backs just to tackle straight up in the league when he's really bringing it. And I think they can get that out of him here. So, that's kind of my fantasy football take here. And I'll shout out my sponsor, Underdog. If you're playing best ball drafts on Underdog, or you can do, season-long pick'ems right now, I kind of like getting a little Ramondre Stevenson higher and TreVeyon Henderson lower. Henderson's set at 700 rushing yards right now. That feels a little bit high to me. I think Henderson's more of a 550 to 650 type rushing season. And if you want to kind of follow me on that, you can go sign up at Underdog. Use code TFG. They'll give you a bonus match when you sign up. You'll support my channel in the process. Or maybe you want to go against me here and just load up on TreVeyon Henderson to have a huge season. Go for it. I can't stop you there. But Underdog's great, man. They've been a great partner. You can also do baseball pick'ems throughout the summer. Their best ball competitions are one of my favorites. I feel like I'm doing a fantasy draft on Underdog every day nowadays, whether it's baseball or a full season football draft. But yeah, code TFG at Underdog. They're just a great partner to work with. Definitely deserve a shout out here. You guys can go check it out. But let's get back to the backfield here. It is ultimately a good duo. You do have questions there, right? Stevenson could not hold on to the football last year, to the point that they kind of are trying to light a fire under his ass or even replace him with a high second round pick. And then I personally have some questions about just how good of a runner TreVeyon Henderson is. I really don't have questions about the receiving side of things and what they see in him there. And then you do still have Antonio Gibson there. Probably not going to get too many touches, though, if we're being honest. You would like to think that when they're trying to create those explosive plays, they're going to try to make themselves look right with that second-round rookie draft pedigree over someone like Antonio Gibson, even if I do think Gibson can do a lot of that same stuff. So Travion Williams, Lan Larison, Terrell Jennings after that, not really worth bringing up. But that's how you get the C+ grade and the 22nd to 26th ranked running back room. It's not a group that's going to hold them back. And if Travion Henderson is just way better than I'm projecting, it's going to be a damn good running back room. Some people might rank it higher than I've got it. But there are ultimately a lot of really good backfields in the league right now. And I'm not quite ready to say this Patriots backfield is like awesome. But I certainly think it's enough to have a good running game here. And then you have Drake May as a contributor to the run game with our QB run multiplier. I gave it a C+ for the Patriots because I just don't know that there's too much evidence that they want to use him as a designed runner. That's never been a huge part of Josh McDaniels' history. Last year, Drake May had only 8 designed runs, and I'm not able to filter through how many of those were QB sneaks, but presumably a good handful, if not all of them were. He is a fantastic athlete, and he can break tackles, he can make you miss. If they wanted to run read options and make him more of a threat off of like play action boots and stuff, there is room for them to use him more so that I would factor his legs into the run game equation on the Patriots more. But I just don't fully expect that, so that's why it's just a C+ grade with that kind of 17th to 21st ranking. They get a little bit of a boost for it, but it's nothing substantial, and I would maybe like to see a little bit more there. Not to the extent that you're risking them getting hurt, but keep those backside ends honest a little bit more, and you can get some explosive plays out of Drake May. He's a really special runner, so maybe a little word of advice for the Patriots play callers. But let's discuss our last group with this offense and this offensive line that, good news for you Patriots fans, one way or another will be upgraded from last season. It's just a matter of how much upgraded that will be to be determined. But I think you'll take where I have them ranked right now. They are my 23rd overall offensive line. They rank 23rd to 26th for pass blocking and a little bit higher for run blocking, 19th to 21st. And that was a C grade for pass blocking and a C+ for run blocking. As we go from left to right here, though, there are certainly question marks and areas for this team to prove out to be a good unit. That's going to start with the rookie at left tackle in Will Campbell. I think with Will Campbell, the odds that his floor is a solid starting offensive lineman, the odds are very, very high. And that's why it's hard to be overly critical of that draft pick, considering the offensive line was such a disaster. They needed a left tackle. Will Campbell, at least for now, is going to play left tackle and step in. And I just don't see him being a guy that's going to come out and get his ass kicked. What I do question is if he has the upside to be a great left tackle, whereas they did pass on a wide receiver that I viewed as one of the blue chip players in this draft and someone that could be a real difference-making player. When it comes to Will Campbell, I get why they really needed this. They fell in love with his personality and what he's going to bring to this locker room. I understand all of that. And when you look at the market, this was a really tough offseason for left tackles. So again, your other options might have been like overpaying for a Dan Moore or rolling the dice on a second round tackle or something like that. So I do ultimately understand it. I ended up settling on like a B grade for this draft pick. But a reason I'm like lower on his upside is the length. And I know Patriots fans are tired of hearing about it, but my record will tell you, I wasn't worried about the length on Rashawn Slater. I loved that pick. I wasn't worried about it with someone like Zach Tom that I thought was this amazing steal for the Packers in the 4th round, who's their franchise right tackle now. Even like a Peter Skoronski, I didn't talk about it too much because those guys tape in college, you didn't see the length leading to losses in the way that you really did with Will Campbell. I think there was this narrative that his college tape was like flawless, and it just wasn't. Like when he went against NFL level bull rushers, he got overwhelmed and he got pushed back into the quarterback and was holding on for dear life. And, I understand like PFF pass blocking grade is looked down upon and isn't always perfect, but like he had something like a 78 PFF pass blocking grade, which is just solid for a college tackle. I think that was reflective of the tape. Like he was not this flawless, did not lose pass protector. His technique is excellent. Love his footwork, love his hands, love the way he varies his strikes to try to compensate for that lack of length. But at the same time, you could say that means there's less room for him to grow. You look at like an Armin Membu, who they also passed on, by the way. They were worried if Membu could play left tackle. I don't know if that's a legitimate concern or not. But you look at Membu, it's like, well, that dude's got traits for days. He actually was his efficiency was better against the same SEC competition, but he doesn't have the advanced hand technique and the amazing footwork that Will Campbell has. But because of his traits, he was actually even better. He just was. Like, his efficiency across the board was better. I think Campbell was more assignment sound, and in some areas of his game has a higher floor than a Membu. But yeah, ultimately, like, again, he's going to probably be a pretty solid left tackle. Out the gate, you're not going to have to trot out there week one and be terrified that Drake May is going to be getting pressured 8 times a game off his blind side, but he is going to have to be aware that, yeah, probably anywhere from 2 to 5 times a game, he's probably going to get pushed back and overwhelmed by some of the game's elite edge rushers. And when you do have to go against certain matchups, guys like Myles Garrett, Montez Sweat, Rashawn Gary, like some of these real length power-based rushers, I do think like you've got to give him some chip help and account for the fact that that's going to be more of a matchup dependent week for Will Campbell. So hopefully they can game plan around that as well. But I will end on just a positive note. Like, it is a pretty good feeling still, like knowing you've got a rookie coming in that is going to raise the floor of that left tackle spot, and that you don't really have to coach up too much in the way that you probably would have with someone like a Armin Membu in terms of assignments and some of the technique stuff. Like, you do kind of know what you're getting in Will Campbell. It's just, was the cost of that worth what you paid for it compared to what you also could have had with that 4th overall pick, is just kind of where I came down on it. But that's enough time on Will Campbell. I think you get the point there. Left guard's going to be your biggest question mark with this offensive line. It could really be anybody right now. It's looking like Cole Strange, if he can stay healthy. You know, Cole Strange has kind of become a laughingstock because he was a first-round pick and kind of came out of nowhere there. It was always, a little bit early to take Cole Strange. But I will say, like, if the dude could ever stay healthy in the NFL, I don't think we would be looking back on this as such an egregious draft pick. Like, I think he probably would have developed into at least an okay player. That's really what's held him back, frankly, is he's missed so much time since he's come into the league. And then last year was such a disaster. They had him move into center. He actually, like, I think played okay as a center last year. He still has traits. He's a tough dude. He wants to get better. It's just his body keeps betraying him. I'm not sitting around waiting on a, year 4 breakout from Cole Strange. I would even bet against that he can stay healthy. But he definitely, I think, a healthy Cole Strange is their best guard. And then he also he brings the best upside to the table. And what he always was best at coming out of Chattanooga, right, was that bucket step and the wide zone blocking, getting on the move and creating that kind of open lane through the wave of the wide zone, if you will. So if that is what they want to do more of, he definitely is a fit for that. So I guess keep an eye on Cole Strange to have a nice season. But for me, it's really health. And even then, like, he is a little bit on the lower end of like play strength. He can get tossed around a little bit, and that's hurt him from being a really good player too. But he's probably the favorite to be the left guard if he's healthy. I want to just rip through the other options there before we go to the center position. And there's definitely some names here. Sidy Sow has had some good flashes as a run blocker and absolutely no good signs as a pass blocker. He's also dealt with injuries. Layden Robinson, kind of likewise. He played a lot last year, showed really good stuff in the run game at times, but was blowing assignments at other times and falling off blocks at other times. And he was maybe even worse as a pass blocker. So right now it feels like he's not even really in the mix because they want to make sure Drake May has some time to throw. I don't think rookie Jared Wilson would be in the mix at guard. We'll talk more about him as a center. Ben Brown did play some center for them last year. Again, I think probably more of a center option. They got 3 undrafted guys vying for a roster spot if one exists beyond those guys. Like they don't have options at guard. Honestly, maybe the next best bet could be either Caden Wallace or Vidarian Lowe sliding inside. I don't know. I mean, Wallace was a slight reach in the third round, but I liked some of the stuff he did at Penn State, watching him side by side with Olu Fashanu. I thought he was a capable tackle to maybe slide inside as a guard, just kind of lacked the foot speed. He was the previous regime's kind of guy in many ways, and I don't think he really fits the wide zone blocking concepts that they want to run here, just because he's not quite the athlete, but he at least has play strength and good hands, and maybe, I guess. Vidarian Lowe, for me, like the mental side of things just never have ticked up with him, along with the technique. But he's always been a guy that looks the part. He was extremely streaky to bad for them last year. And then they did draft Marcus Bryant in the 7th round. DeMontre Jacobs played some tackle for them last year. This depth is tough to look at, man. And if Cole Strange can't stay healthy, you are worried about that left guard spot being one of the weaker links that an offensive line has this year. So that has to be considered as an issue for this offense, or at best a potential issue. The rest of the group, you kind of know what you have, but it's not perfect. Garrett Bradbury, a run block oriented center, and he's a core aspect that hints to them wanting to be a wide zone team, because if you're not a wide zone run game, Garrett Bradbury essentially has no use for you. He is still probably top 10 in the league in terms of opening up from the snap and reaching a defensive tackle and being a good wide zone run blocker. He will bring that to the table still. But as Minnesota became more and more of a pass-oriented team and they wanted better pass protection to take care of the young J.J. McCarthy, they elected to move on from Garrett Bradbury, because he just, outside of being good with like blitz pickups, or if you get him matched up with like really lighter defensive tackles that are just trying to win with finesse, he is one of the worst anchors of any starting center in the league, and he's not an asset in pass protection. So the idea here is that you're going to work Bradbury and Cole Strange, or whoever's at guard, on your double teams. Those two guys can handle that, and then everybody else is going to be kind of fending for themselves. It's not ideal, but you can at least try to scheme around it, but that's also a tell to the defense to dial up some diabolical blitzes and stuff if they know exactly where you're going to be sliding the double team towards. Ultimately, you know what you're getting in Bradbury, but maybe the best part of this signing is to get a nice mentor in here for Jared Wilson, who has a lot of physical traits, just a one-year starter at Georgia that technically he has some guard experience and could be a part of the guard, competition for sure, but I think they want him to be the long-term center here, and especially if they're going to be a wide zone offense, that was what he really did at his best, or at least his best reps were in that wide zone run game. One note on him was he was just a little bit slow kind of snapping the ball and then opening up. So like just his first year snapping the football, there's a technique side of things that I think can improve his game as a run blocker at center. And he was notably smooth as a pass blocker. I would just love for the young guy to bulk up a little bit and improve that anchor. But there's a lot of potential as a 3rd round pick for him to be their starter in 2026 and hopefully well beyond that. I think the process with that pick is really good. He's far from a guarantee, but the value was good and definitely is going to have a chance to carve out that role in the future. Just, again, not expecting him necessarily to be great as a rookie. But fortunately, at right guard and right tackle, these guys should be able to mostly hold their own. Mike Onwenu is a very, very steady, kind of borderline top 10 guard. He's played tackle, and he's been very matchup dependent at tackle because you watch him move, and at 6'3", you can tell he is a guard by build, but he's got a great anchor, and he's tough, and he's had some games at right tackle where he's hung in there, but ultimately they know he's best as a guard, and he's a very, very steady player. He's not a great athlete. He's not impenetrable, well, he's kind of impenetrable in the sense of his anchor is great, but he's not impossible to get past as a pass rusher. If you've got a good swim move, or you line up on one shoulder, you can cross the other shoulder, like you can get him with finesse. But he's ultimately the best overall starter on this unit, and not a concern. Good overall player. Then you got Morgan Moses at right tackle, kind of the ageless wonder. I mean, I've been saying for years, man, Morgan Moses just might damn well be the most underrated player in the entire league. Certainly by the league, might be the most underrated player. This to me is a franchise right tackle, or at least he has been over the last decade, that has never been fairly treated like a franchise tackle. He's been tossed around like a hand-me-down, like teams were always going to upgrade at right tackle over him, and it's never made sense to me. So for the Patriots to stick him in free agency, even though he's 34 years old, it was a no-brainer. I mean, you look at the tackle market, and what a bargain to get Morgan Moses for $8 million a year. So I mean, I love this signing. His efficiency went down with the Jets last year. I don't think he looks quite as athletic as he did even a couple years ago in Baltimore. I will admit he's 34 years old, but I do think as long as he's healthy, and that's another thing, is he has been getting banged up. Like he can miss some time. I think that's part of the reason teams have moved on and off of him. So you unfortunately kind of anticipate, okay, there might be 4 or 5 games where we do have to go to that bad depth at tackle, and that adds a little bit of a question mark there. But beyond the occasional loss from him, where he's not a perfect pass blocker, but beyond the occasional loss, you're feeling really good about bringing him in compared to what they were working with last year, which is, it was DeMontre Jacobs who just might not make this team this year. So they're kind of in this world that a lot of teams that have bad offensive lines have to live in, where you're trying to throw some darts, raise the floor of the overall unit, understanding that really nobody's perfect. All of these guys have their flaws for sure. And it's not going to be this super highly ranking offensive line, I would say, one way or another. I don't think there's a ton of upside with this unit to really even be like a top 20 offensive line. I think you're raising the floor with a lot of these signings. And even Will Campbell himself, like, of course, there's always room for any rookie to get even better, but he is especially a rookie that, like, he kind of is what he is. So I don't know that you look at him and it's like you would even say, maybe he surprises and you get a Tristan Wirfs rookie season from Will Campbell. I just don't think that upside exists with this player. And then the rest of these guys, it's like, yeah, there's just not a lot of room for growth. You're just trying to raise the floor. So there's your offensive line. You do have to mention they get a slight boost, though, from the skill blockers. Austin Hooper's a good blocking tight end, too. Mac Hollins was brought in for a reason. Like, they're going to get some contributions on the wing and from the perimeter. We'll see what the rookie, Brock Lamp at fullback, can do, too. But that does round out the Patriots offense that comes in 28th for me as we head into the start of the season. And we still got to talk about this defense, but that's obviously a core reason why the Patriots do come in 27th. And, Patriots fans aren't going to be a fan of that, but as we just profiled, man, like, you have got questions in every single position group here. You can stay hopeful and look at some of the upside with Drake May and some of the upside with the weapons, and maybe the backfield a little bit, and say, all right, yeah, no, things could definitely be better than 28th, and that's obviously the hope here. But as we rank teams closer to their floor heading into the year, 29th in passing game and 24th in run game. This team, in my opinion, has a lot of work to do on this side of the ball before they are consistent and consistently explosive, as so many offenses are trying to be in the league today. But let's move over to the defensive side of the ball, where there is some good stuff to talk about here for sure, but also some question marks. So let's get into it. Starting with the defensive line, this unit really struggled to get after the quarterback last year, and they're obviously hoping that's going to be much improved this season. I still have them with some room to go here, but they do rank with a respectable ranking 23rd to 25th for pass rush. And then they have that same C+ grade for D-line run defense, but that does leave them a little bit higher relative to the rest of the league for the run defense with this group, where they are 17th to 21st for D-line run defense, and that leaves them as the 24th overall defensive line, which to me sounds right, but Patriots fans, you'll have to let me know if that sounds too high or too low. It's kind of an interesting group where they're really good at pass rushing from the interior, but the run defense from the interior might not be amazing. And then inversely, on the edge, I'm worried about the pass rush from the edge, but their run defense off the edge is really, really good. But let's start with the interior, because that's where the core of their star talent is here, especially after the new addition of Milton Williams, who just totally broke out for Philadelphia last year, earned a massive contract in New England, and they really broke out the checkbook because the Panthers wanted him. The Patriots are like, wait, we'll give you another $2 or $3 million a year above that. So he's now one of the highest paid defensive players in the entire league, which, that's what the open market will do for you. He's not a true number one defensive lineman. Certainly hasn't proven to be that yet, though his efficiency down the stretch for the Eagles and the way he was really terrorizing offensive lines, as was that entire Eagles defense. I mean, that was number one production, but that was a glimpse out of a 4-year career that he's still going to have to prove that was more than just a hot stretch against, one-on-one blocks, because Jalen Carter was the one getting double teamed on that defensive line. But not to take that away from him, like he's emerged, man, and he is at worst going to be a really high-end number 2 pass rusher in a best-case scenario. Now, he's got to be the Patriots' best pass rusher here, and that is more pressure on him. But ultimately, I love the signing, right? You got all the money in the world. This defensive line was pretty tough to watch trying to get after the quarterback last year. Go get yourself a pass rusher, and that's what they got in Milton Williams. He is hyper twitched up, always has been, coming out of college, played some edge, tested super well, was kind of a traits-based developmental mid-round pick by the Eagles that just got the right coaching and really clicked in his final season there in Philly. And he's got the first step that you look for. He's got a great bull rush. He's got some finesse rush moves in there to cross your face. And then as a run defender, he gives you what he can at 290 pounds. It's tough at that size to be hyper consistent, and you're going to have a little bit of a trade-off there where if you are going with, more of an even front or a 4-man front, he's going to face his double teams and he's going to get flushed out of some games, some run games. And again, that's just part of what you're going to live with more of an undersized, pass rushing oriented interior player like him, but they're clearly comfortable living in that world with what they paid him. And then next to him, you have Christian Barmore, and he is kind of like we talked about with Stephon Diggs, another guy that's very much like a polarizing kind of wild card factor for this team. Really weird year last year where he had a blood clot condition diagnosed in the offseason, right kind of before the start of the year. I think it was in late July. But anyway, he missed all of last year for all intents and purposes. He did get out there for the final 4 games, and I watched his snaps. That wasn't the Christian Barmore I know and love and remember. I don't know that if he was out of shape or, because it's very possible he couldn't do conditioning or keep himself in shape because of the blood clots. I'm sure someone else could tell this story better than me, but what I do know is that the tape on him, in the very small glimpse that we got, you throw it out, but you also have to acknowledge Jesus, man, if that's what Christian Barmore is now, they got burned on this contract, and it's not their fault, right? It's not Barmore's fault at all, but from a financial standpoint, they had just paid him, and then the blood clot thing comes in. They got to get the old Barmore back, dude, because him in 2023, one of my favorite kind of breakout, emerging superstar players. I was so excited to see him in another year after earning that contract. He's not just a difference-making pass rusher at his best, where he's even got more size than a Milton Williams, but he has a tremendous first step for a big guy. He's got quickness to win with finesse moves, but he can bull rush you. He really was on the cusp of being viewed in my eyes as one of the 5 best pass rushing interior D linemen in the league, and we just didn't get that last year for really unfortunate circumstances. And he's done a good job improving as a run defender. I may or may not have said that already, but the optimistic spin on this is he's going to be back. They're going to just, press resume on what they were expecting from him when they paid him before the blood clots came in. And if that happens, I think you crank up the rating I have on him a little bit, not a lot of bit. I'm still giving him a very nice ranking and attributing him well towards this overall D-line grade. 81 rating, 83 as a rusher, 77 in run defense. Like, look, you guys that have been around the channel know I think the world of Christian Barmore, but I'm skeptical on what all we're going to get from him. So he is definitely the biggest wild card for this defense. And it's another situation, if you could guarantee me him just resuming his greatness, I would certainly crank the pass rush grade up, probably from a C+ to like a B-. I think Milton Williams and Christian Barmore at his best are both 2A level rushers. And this is pretty nitty gritty, but the reason I say 2A is ideally you would have a real number one guy next to that. He can be sort of the Robin to somebody's Batman. But I do think if you have a pair of 2A level guys, and then you can surround them with adequate number 3 types of guys, you can still have a pretty damn good pass rush with that formula, even if it's maybe going to be held back from being like an elite top, say 5 to 8 level pass rush. But you can, if you can get the old Barmore back, you have a pair of 2A level guys and some number 3s off the edge, I think you can start to cook a little bit, maybe with a Mike Vrabel as well, helping scheme things up. Just going to have to wait and see what you get from Barmore. Then we'll go through the rest of the interior D-line and circle back to this edge group that I've obviously voiced some questions about. But you got Khyiris Tonga. He is there for those moments, and could be many moments, could be not so many moments, but he's there to be the nose tackle when Vrabel's ready to run an odd front and have that nose tackle out there to eat gaps and be that big-bodied guy. Really nobody else, other than maybe Kalen Roy, is that for them. And Tonga's been a good player for where he came into the league, and he's bounced around from team to team, but he can hold his own as a nose tackle. He's not a huge playmaker or anything like that, but I like bringing him in. I think they gave him like 1 year, $2 million, and he'll be a part of that nose tackle role. They draft Josh Farmer in the 4th round. Good draft pick, guy that projects as someone that can come in, eat up some early downs as a run defender. Just doesn't have a lot of like killer instincts or great athleticism as a rusher to project as having too much upside there, but I think he can be a really nice kind of early down DT3 for run defense. Jeremiah Farms is here to be your sort of hybrid end for some of those 3-4 base looks, and a backup to Milton Williams to maybe keep him fresh for some of those reps. Let Farms do a little bit of that dirty work as your kind of penetrating, athletic, undersized 4-eye technique. So all those guys kind of play their role. And then Ja'Kalen Roy is just a nice kind of dart throw to have around here. He was drafted, I want to say 4th round by the Vikings. They moved on from him pretty quickly. I saw some flashes from Ja'Kalen Roy for the Patriots last year. I thought he was really good at getting off blocks at LSU, but just had to improve his pad level and consistency as a run defender. So keep an eye on him too to carve out a role as an early down run defender. And that kind of rounds out capable defensive tackle depth. No one with crazy upside or anything to really write home about, but some nice pieces for sure. But yeah, let's talk about this edge group. It's not that it's a horrible room. It's just from a pass rushing perspective, it kind of is. It's tough because Keion White is a bit of a... I didn't fully put the wild card on him and say we don't really know what we're going to get from Keion White. But he has been a little bit up and down, and kind of the way he's used is a little unique because his best moments as a pass rusher come when they take him and have him kind of stand up over a guard and kind of use his unique traits to win on swim moves and a little bit of a bull rush, but just being kind of a mismatch problem as a rushing guy over the guard. Whereas you watch him off the edge, and it's not that he's bad, but he just doesn't win nearly as much off the edge. And I do expect Vrabel to use him in that sense and for him to factor into the pass rush. But on your typical just kind of base 4-2 nickel, they haven't been able to get as much from Keion White off the edge. As a run defender, though, he's very good. He's very solid. He's got the arm length. He's got the size. He's got the effort. So he contributes as a run defender off the edge. I'm probably not projecting another leap from Keion White after he kind of emerged as this kind of chess piece pass rusher that can be a good number 3 for you. At this point, he's already 26, 27 years old, probably not expecting another massive leap from him. But he is a nice player and the best in that edge group. He's also probably going to play a fair share of defense, like that 4-eye, if they want to get into a base 3-4, or if they want to run a 5-1 penny front, he's probably going to play a little bit of defensive end for them too. So he's kind of this just chess piece, jack of all trades, master of none type for them. But definitely the first sort of edge rusher by positional designation worth mentioning, because Harold Landry, I said it in the intro, but they gave him way too much money because Mike Vrabel remembers coaching him 2 years ago. But especially since his ACL injury, I think a couple of years ago, there's just not a whole lot of pass rushing explosiveness from him. He still has a nice first step. He can still bend at the hips. He can still kind of have that speed rush and threaten the top of a tackle's drop. And if you go up against kind of a mauling tackle that struggles to get that depth, like he can kind of threaten the top of the corner and make the quarterback uneasy and force you to step up. And in this setup, that's going to have some success at times because you got Milton and Barmore hopefully compressing the pocket so that the QB doesn't have room to step up. But that also is only against certain tackle matchups. A lot of great athletes at tackle in the league today, and there's a lot of games where Harold Landry just basically gives you nothing as a pass rusher. And he was far and away the lowest pass rusher in the NFL per PFF pass rush win rate. His pressure rate was at about 7%, which, guys, 10% is like the baseline for, like, okay, you're an NFL player, you can be on the field as a third down player if you have a 10% pressure rate. And he was a good bit below that at 7%. And even then, most of his pressures are just forcing the quarterback to step up, or the occasional time where he'll win on an inside swipe against a slower footed tackle. But he's a run defense player that, because of what he's paid and his previous success, and even last year he stumbled into 9 sacks as a cleanup artist, because he is a high effort player, and if other guys generate pressure, he can clean up. And Jeffrey Simmons and Devondre Sweat would flush some guys into him at times. And he is a good contained player. He can push you back and have the quickness to contain and clean up some of that stuff. So you can give him a little bit of credit for that. But ultimately, like, for the vast majority of offensive tackles, you're excited for the opportunity to go up against Harold Landry right now, who's a speed rusher without amazing speed and absolutely no power threat at all. You really just have to make sure you stay in front of him and don't stop your feet. And you're going to be just fine. And your quarterback's going to be just fine. And I'm just not a fan of giving that player $14 million a year, even if he is a high-effort run defender that will be a good locker room presence and set the intensity at the line. And I understand they're looking for some of that. I would argue a couple things. Number one, you didn't have to rush to the table to pay Harold Landry. I find it very hard to believe that there were other teams that wanted to give him what the Patriots did. And if they are, I just don't know if the NFL is up to date on what he is today versus what he was 4 years ago. But at the same time, like, I think they had a better version of Harold Landry in Anthony Jennings at home, who I think gives you even more as a run defender. And I don't like taking run defense snaps in any sense away from Anthony Jennings to give to Harold Landry. Even if Harold Landry is pretty good at it, I think Anthony Jennings is one of the best tone-setting edge rushers in the league. And even him was a more efficient pass rusher with a bull rush last year. So I would rather just Harold Landry wasn't here and it's Anthony Jennings and Kayvon Chason are your guys, because that duo would make a lot more sense, because I think you can make a pretty damn strong case that Jennings is a better run defender than Landry, and that Kayvon Chason, who they gave a 1-year, $5 million prove-it deal to, is the better pass rusher than Harold Landry. And Harold Landry is going to take a lot of snaps away from both of those guys and just not be as efficient as had you just use those guys in a rotation. So again, I'm very low on the Harold Landry signing. And I think in some ways it's going to hold this defense back at times. But yeah, I mean, Chason was fun to watch last year. I went through his pressures, and he developed a really nice cross chop. And for a former first round pick that was a complete bust for the Jags, I know Jags fans like throwing their hands up, like, where was this when you were in Jacksonville for 4 years? But he developed some skills, and for a guy that was a highly recruited dude coming out of LSU, drafted really high, kind of always probably fed with a silver spoon, and never really had to prove that he can develop the technique so that he can beat NFL competition, kind of finally gets written off. And that's when he starts to develop a little bit and show off some of the traits. So he's at least someone to keep an eye on, as like there could be something there. He's always had the traits, a lot of twitch, decent arm length for his size. And I like the signing just to kind of see what he can do as he stood out last season. And that's, again, it's like, kind of wish those snaps were just going to Chason so you could see what you might have in him, as opposed to Harold Landry at this point. And then they did draft Braden Swinson as well. He falls to the 5th round. It kind of comes out after the draft that he is one of these guys that talks back to coaches and maybe isn't the best presence in the locker room. That's at least everything I've heard and why he fell. I already wasn't fully on the Braden Swinson as kind of a top 50 player in the draft. There's a lot of hype for that. He was more of a early third type of guy for me, but he's a guy that kind of does a little bit of everything. I think he has a chance to emerge as a nice number 3 edge rusher, is kind of where I always had him landing. He's got some power. He's got some different rush moves he likes to mix in, and he likes to defend the run. He's got decent, good, not great traits. Just a very balanced overall prospect. In the 5th round, it's a great value, and I think he can become a part of the rotation here. So a nice pick for sure, even if I wouldn't expect him to really ever be a full-time starter for them. And then there might be room for Truman Jones or Elijah Ponder to make it. I know Elijah Ponder tested super, super well. So, traits at this position are always worth getting an extended look at. But that does round out your defensive line. Again, I think the 24th ranking really makes sense as we talk this through. It's a useful group. Vrabel's going to be able to do some good stuff with this, and hopefully can set up a good rotation where he's putting guys in advantageous situations for their skill sets. And then hopefully in time, you can find more of a legit kind of real starting edge player. It doesn't need to be an elite guy if Milton Williams and Barmore can, be the best version of themselves. But yeah, in time, you're going to want maybe a Rashawn Gary, Montez Sweat, someone in that tier of really good kind of high-end number 2 edge rusher as well. And then if you can have 3 kind of number 2s out there, then you can really start to make some noise with your pass rush. But they obviously didn't have enough resources to fix everything on this defense, and they're trying to do what they can. Then you got the linebacker room. I like this group. They come in ranked 14th for me, which is a really solid ranking. A little bit lower for coverage, 18th to 22nd for coverage, and then 14th to 10th for run defense. And a big part of this is the Robert Spillane signing, who's just an absolute Mike Vrabel linebacker. You think back to some of these guys Vrabel had in Tennessee with Jayon Brown and David Long Jr., and those guys especially, they would blow gaps. They would guess too quickly. They would jump up on the line and throw their head into a guard at times. And sometimes the running back would get to the second level and say, oh, wow, there's no linebacker here. Where did he go? And have these explosive runs. And that can have it can lead to a little bit of more of a boomer bust style from those linebackers. But Mike Vrabel kind of demanded that out of a linebacker. He was like, I'll try to coach some discipline and risk assessment into you. But if you aren't eager to trigger, love to hit, and willing to throw your head in the mud to destroy ball carriers, I don't want you. And Robert Spillane has that trait through and through. But he also, I don't want to make it sound like he's over aggressive all the time and constantly blowing gaps. Yeah, it might happen sometimes, but he has a balance to it, and he can get off blocks. A lot of these gap shooting linebackers, sometimes they play with that style because they're trying to beat linemen to the spot, and because they can't get off of linemen if they engage with them. I think Spillane at times can do that. So he's really made a case for being one of the better run defending linebackers in the entire league. He's improved his tackling consistency year in, year out as well, which you love to see. And honestly, he's not I wouldn't say he's a bad coverage linebacker. He's just one of these guys that, like, most of the time he doesn't quite have the range to, like, pick up a guy on a deep crosser or man up a tight end or, like, be this lockdown, consistent coverage linebacker. But he does have zone IQ and he's got good risk assessment. There's going to be some impact plays in coverage because he's willing to take risks and can find himself in the right position at times. So, like, he'll make an impact on coverage, but there's going to be weeks where he hurts you as well. So that's a big reason why the run defense grade for the linebacker room is higher than the coverage group, is just Robert Spillane's skill set alone. But really good signing, about 3 years, $33 million. It's exactly what I would have paid Robert Spillane, and they needed a guy like this that's more proven. And he's an absolute Mike Vrabel dude. So love the signing. And then Christian Ellis next to him. I'm actually a big fan of Christian Ellis too, and I put the up arrow on Christian Ellis, even though he's heading into year 5. This is kind of the sweet spot for guys like Ellis that no matter where they got drafted, like, find a guy with the athletic traits, and we know Ellis has the athleticism. This family has just put out some crazy athletes with Caden Ellis, his brother, who, you know, frankly, his path through the Saints and now on the Falcons is a big reason I believe Christian Ellis is kind of just getting started here in year 5. Caden Ellis was a 7th round pick, was kind of a backup for a few years, and then got an opportunity and really showed off some high-end linebacker play. Now he's just a good overall player for the Falcons. See a very similar trajectory with Christian. And then his other brother, Jonah, was a 3rd round pick by the Broncos. They have a 4th brother that was like a 330-pound nose tackle that had a cup of coffee in the league. So this is a really athletic, motivated group of brothers that have just made it in the league. And Christian Ellis's tape in the 1 year last year where he broke through as a starter, I think they picked him up off of like Philly's practice squad. Just think that Christian Ellis, there's a chance that I think was going to be in that room with like Zach Bond and those guys. But not on, like, Caden Ellis, Zach Bond. I mean, Zach Bond was like first team all pro, so I'm not saying Ellis is going to do that. But Christian Ellis, these guys that just year 5, after a lot of coaching and really working at this position that is one of the hardest, if not the hardest, position in the entire league to play right now with all the RPOs and play action and everything, something can click at this position group, and I do believe in him. I think he's got all the tools in both phases. There's some really exciting flashes in coverage. There's definitely still room to grow in terms of what he's looking at and consistently navigating himself in front of passing lanes. But when he does guess right, he can man guys up. There's a play against the Cardinals that I love where he gets mesh against him and he jams Marvin Harrison as he's crossing his face. He understands the space of it all where he can legally do that. If Marv is near the line of scrimmage, he can jam him. And then Kyler scrambles and you see the athleticism and he runs out and brings him down in space. And you're like, okay, Christian Ellis, like, you've got it. You've got everything it takes to be a quality starter in the league. And I would not be the least bit surprised if Mike Vrabel, of all people, was able to get that out of him. So he's one of the defenders, frankly, even if he's in year 5 or whatever it is, that I'm most excited to see what he can be for this team. And if he reaches his upside, you get a little bit more athleticism next to a Robert Spillane. This could really be one of the 5 or 6 best linebacking groups in the entire league. But this does get a little muddy because Jelani Tavai is still here, and Vrabel did come in and they did extend Jelani Tavai. They gave him real, like, solid money, a 3-year, $16 million contract. Most of the guarantees are in year 1, so like year 2, year 3, they can take just $1.5 million cap hits per season to release him. So there's some fake money in there, but that is like you're going to play type of money. But they also extended Christian Ellis for more per year on a 2-year deal, which leads me to believe Ellis is going to play more and be the kind of starting LB2. But Tavai certainly is going to be a package defender, whether they're in a base 4-3 and he's kind of the overhang, strong side Sam linebacker, Or I do think, like we said, Mike Vrabel wants to be able to run every front in the book. And if they want to run a 6-1 front, which a lot of these coaches in this Belichick system have wanted to do, that was something Bill did against the Rams wide zone rushing attack in that Super Bowl that had so much success that I think it was actually Matt Patricia that broke it out first from this coaching staff earlier in that year. But anyway, if you want to run that 6-1 front especially, which, Jelani Tavai is your on-the-ball kind of linebacker for those, makes a lot of sense. Or they sometimes want that smasher to be in the middle of that formation because he can kind of get off blocks like the nose tackle because you usually leave the center uncovered. We're getting pretty into the weeds there, but there are definitely packages that they want to use Jelani Tavai. That's my spin on it, is that he's not really going to threaten Christian Ellis's breakout as a real starter, but he is going to play and, is going to have a role because he's kind of this instinctive, bigger body that's never really had a home as like a real 3-down linebacker. He's had some flashes in that role, but is a nice piece to have as an LB3. Jack Gibbons is, to me, more of your backup linebacker, where if anything happened to Spillane or Ellis, that's someone that Vrabel can trust, that has run, at least knows the system and then ran an extension of that system after Vrabel left. He's had some success as a run defender in Tennessee. He's a very nice backup. He would be in the mix for starting jobs in some rooms that we've talked about even already. Then Marte Mapu, safety that's going to be, making the official switch to linebacker for Vrabel. That makes sense to me. I mean, he was always more of a linebacker to me than a safety, but he was actually playing deep for Gerard Mayo last year. I don't know that he should have been. But there's not a ton of opportunity for Marte Mapu unless they start to take some of these guys off the field and put Mapu in as a dime linebacker, which they might do depending on how good Spillane and Ellis are in coverage. But other than that, I don't know that there's too much of an opportunity. But he does just those three guys give you really unique skill sets for a coach like Vrabel to deploy. And then Monty Rice, it's good to know that Mike Vrabel also hasn't quit Monty Rice, because I loved Monty Rice coming out and I can't quit Monty Rice. So it's funny to see him here, although I think he was on this team late last season anyway. But yeah, it's a very fun group of linebackers. You might not have that superstar talent that gets them up really into the top 10. I think Spillane's right on the cusp of top 10, like we said. And then if Ellis can really break through in his second season as a starter here, there is absolutely room for this to be a very balanced top 10 group of linebackers in the league. But now let's go to this secondary, which for me is, by far the best unit on this Patriots team, and genuinely just one of the best secondaries in the entire NFL. I have them tied for the second best secondary in the league with 4 other teams. So they rank 2nd to 5th with an A- DB coverage grade. And they're also phenomenal in run defense, by the way. They get an A grade there in that first tier of DB run support, which is 7 teams get that A grade. So this is a sensational group. Frankly, I cannot wait to see Mike Vrabel deploy these guys. And the core reason for that ranking is Christian Gonzalez, who I said in my intro, I have seen some top 10 cornerback rankings out there on the social medias, and 2 of them, specifically 2 of them, I won't name names, but 2 of them did not include Christian Gonzalez in the top 10 cornerbacks in today's NFL. And that just blows my mind, because I think he has a stronger case for being, I'll just say, the 4th best cornerback in the NFL, then you could have a case to say that he's not a top 10 guy. And I would say with conviction, he is either 3rd or 4th. I think there's a tier 1 with Sauce and Pat Surtain, obviously, with what he did last year. I'm not ready to knock Sauce off of that after just a good, not great 3rd season after being shut down in his first 2 years. I know Patriots fans don't want to hear that. But those 2 guys are 1 and 2. And then I think, and sorry to spoil this for the Texans deep dive, but Derek Stingley and Christian Gonzalez is probably your debate for 3-4. And I would argue Gonzalez is a better, more sticky, consistent coverage defender that had to do what he did with a much worse pass rush than Stingley. Whereas Stingley is maybe a smidge behind Gonzalez in terms of coverage consistency and man-to-man ability, but he makes up a little bit of ground with like genuinely elite ball skills that can change the scope of a football game. So it kind of comes down to what you prefer there, and it's not that Gonzalez's ball skills are bad, but not on Stingley's level. But that's where we're at with Gonzalez. After 1 year as a starter, and in his first year, if you could populate out what he did in the first 4 games of his career as a rookie, we knew he was special based on the tape. But we kind of needed last year of the production and being out there and games where he's out there against number 1 wide receivers, following them around. I mean, I'll say it. He made Marvin Harrison Jr. his bitch. Marvin Harrison Jr. had to go back to the drawing board after having to go up against Christian Gonzalez. But it certainly wasn't just that week. You talk about a guy with the traits, the length, the speed, the remarkable quick twitch, fluid athleticism for a bigger corner, someone that, because he's bigger and is willing to tackle, like he contributes in that phase. I don't think he's bad in zone coverage. I think he's got plenty of zone IQ, which is only going to get better as he gets older. That's what he did a lot of at Oregon, so he's plenty comfortable playing off zone and triggering downhill and all that stuff. And if he plays like he did last year, because this is a volatile position, and any given corner can have a lesser season, you just don't want to see guys become liabilities, and I just can't imagine a world where that would happen with someone like Christian Gonzalez, based on everything we just said. But yeah, I mean, if he repeats and kind of has that all-pro season again, like if he got voted all-pro last year, you'd like to think it could happen again if he repeats his performance. I absolutely think Christian Gonzalez could find himself in that tier that we described as a genuinely elite corner with really just sauce and Pat Surtain, because it's a really hard position to play consistently year in, year out. We got 1 full year of Gonzalez being dominant. And again, that first 4 weeks of his rookie season were really good too. So we haven't really seen any bad play when he's been out there. He's sensational, man. He's one of my favorite players in the league, and it just continues to blow my mind how far he fell in the draft. The amount of teams that screwed up not taking him, it just does not make any sense to me. Patriots were very fortunate that they got to pull the trigger on him. And by the way, just the way they talk about him in the community and like off the field, the dude is just wired the right way. I think his dad was played professional basketball, so like he's grown up around professional sports his whole life. Like there's literally not a bad word to say about Christian Gonzalez. He's the best player on this football team, full stop. And let's get the guy his respect. I don't want to see any more top 10 cornerback rankings without him on it. Like, come on. Next to him, then, now you have Carlton Davis, who's just an extremely steady, high-end number 2 corner when he's healthy. That's really the only holdup on Carlton Davis is availability. That's why Tampa let him go. That's why Detroit ultimately decided not to re-sign him. Like, he misses time. He has not played over 900 snaps in a season since 2020, and that was the only time that he played over 1,000 snaps. That was 4 years ago, and he's missed about, on average, about 4.5 to 5 games every year for the last 4 years. So you hope that it's more of the same, where you still get him for most of the season and just have to deal with him not being there for a stretch of play. But of course, there's a downside to it that, like, Detroit witnessed last year. Like, he was awesome in Detroit last year, and then he goes down week 15 against Buffalo, and the season's over. Now, I don't expect the stakes to be quite as high for New England, at least this year, but they did give him a multi-year deal, and that is just a part of the Carlton Davis conversation. It's always fun and convenient to say here in June that it's going to be different this time. Carlton Davis is going to make it through the whole season, and we don't got to worry about it. Like, that's not going to happen to us. Like, he's just unlucky. At a certain point in time, like, something's going on where the guy gets banged up. And they're usually like kind of minor injuries that take him out for 5 or 6 weeks here or there. So, I like the signing. They didn't exactly bake the injury assessment into it. Like, they paid him $18 million a year for the next 3 years. And that's like low-end number one cornerback money. And Carlton Davis, I would say, is a really high-end number 2. He's super physical, loves press man coverage, smart, like zone corner, will tackle, all that. It's probably part of why he gets hurt sometimes. Maybe a little over-physical at times, but you don't want to take that part of his game away from him. Not the most sensational athlete to be this crazy lockdown, sticky coverage corner, but that's what Christian Gonzalez is there for, right? So he kind of falls into the perfect role. But yeah, I mean, they're paying him like legit money, at least for the next 2 years. 3 years, $54 million contract, 34 guaranteed. You hope you land on the better side of luck with his injuries, both in terms of timing and duration with him. And because of that, I do wish they were a little bit more realistic about trying to get a little bit more depth in here, because of the certainty that you're going to have to go to it, not just with Carlton Davis, but Marcus Jones here has missed a lot of time too. But I would love for the Patriots to kind of keep their eye on the chopping block around training camp and see if there's any CB4s, CB5s that, if you got to start them for 4 or 5 weeks, you can get by with it. Maybe they think that's Alex Austin. I mean, he's a lengthy guy that's played a little bit. Like, theoretically, the skill set is in line with Carlton Davis, but I mean, he's not a good athlete that you would love starting. He's been below average when he's had to play for them. Isaiah Bolden, Marcellus Dial are kind of developmental types. DJ James as well, developmental undersized type. Kobe Miners, a 7th-round rookie. Their cornerback depth is surprisingly thin for a team that has 2 starting corners that have had a very hard time staying healthy. So that's really the biggest criticism of this secondary is depth and durability. But I mean, I love Marcus Jones, man, and I would have loved to put the up arrow on Marcus Jones and a Mike Vrabel defense. Every time I watch his film, I get fired up. But unfortunately, he as well has missed a lot of time. And I also think, like, even when he's been healthy, he's hit a little bit of a ceiling with his lack of size. Like, his margin for error is just very small, with really a lack of length to get his hands in the way of passing lanes. And even when he's in position to break up a pass, a lot of times there's nothing he can really do about it if the throw is right or if the receiver's a bigger guy. So just from a kind of week-to-week matchup dependency and his inability to kind of get in the way of passing lanes, it's just going to create a natural volatility at this position that hurts his consistency. But I've always said with Marcus Jones, like, if you could put him in a more athletic, bit more full-size body, he would be a really good starting corner in the league because he's instinctive and great technique, all of that. He just is 5'8", right? So I think a 76 overall rating with a 75 coverage rating and a B run defense grade, as a slot defender, he will stick his nose in there. And the dude only missed 8% of his tackle attempts last year, which it's actually a very good number for a slot cornerback. To be under 10% is fantastic. So the length doesn't hold him back in that sense. And he's got a great nose for finding the ball on screens and in the trenches. Like, I like him as a slot corner, even if he's short. But a nice player. Despite his deficiencies, if he's your starting slot corner and Carlton Davis and Christian Gonzalez are your outside corners, I can absolutely get behind that. I'm not quite going to throw Marcus Jones into the top 10 slot corner discussion, but probably like top 20 to 24, and that's certainly good enough when you arguably have the best CB duo in the league right now. I might regret saying that if I'm forgetting somebody, but this is certainly up there. And then you have a safety room that is pretty good. You got Kyle Duggar and Jabril Peppers are your core starters. And I would say they are next to Christian Barmore in being pretty big wild cards for this defense. I didn't include them as kind of X-Factor wild card pieces because, unlike Barmore, I feel much better about what we're going to get from Kyle Duggar. and Jabril Peppers, whereas Barmore, I just genuinely have no idea. And I say that because Duggar was visibly playing through a gruesome ankle injury that he probably should not have been asked to play through. He was noticeably slower and had by far his worst year in coverage because of it. And then Jabril Peppers, it's like, well, he still played well, but he had this off-field drama that they are expecting to be in the past and for him to be available for this team. So I feel pretty good about kind of getting these guys back, and I feel pretty good about who they are as players as well, because we've really seen a lot of these guys at this point. And Duggar is just straight up one of the best run defending safeties in the entire league. Loves to hit, can get off blocks. He has tremendous play strength for the position. He can act as a semi-linebacker for this team in certain formations, which gives you a ton of flexibility there. And then, like, in coverage, he has pretty solid long speed, but he's not quick twitch, and I don't think he's really established, like, excellent reactive quickness and response time to route breaks and that kind of stuff. That route squeeze that we always talk about during draft time, it's not outstanding. He's just a fine, okay coverage player with some shortcomings there. And that rounds him out as a really good overall safety, even if he's a little bit more one-dimensional leaning towards the run defense. But outside of last season, I wouldn't say he's ever been a liability as a coverage defender, just someone that can get picked on in the right matchups. And then Jabril Pepper is like, he's just been fantastic. I would argue better than Kyle Duggar since he surfaced here in New England. He brings almost everything Duggar does as a run defender. Probably not quite as good at getting off blocks, but Peppers himself has played some linebacker in the past. And like for a safety, he also can really get off blocks, play around the box, loves to hit. He's been a little bit more up and down in terms of tackling consistency throughout his career, but he's still a very good tackler. And he's got more athletic twitch and I think instincts as a coverage defender too. He's someone they're more comfortable rotating into a single high free safety look, can man up tight ends. Like he's a borderline top 10 safety that probably doesn't get all of that respect because he's kind of a late career breakout type of player, and he's turning 30 years old here, but they were able to extend him. They bring him in 2022 really for nothing. In half the season, he plays great, and then 2023, where he's 28 years old, he is by far the best year of his career. They extend him, and then again, last year, he played at that level for the most part, I think, but he had to come off the field for the commissioner's exempt list. So I don't really have any commentary on what happened off the field or if I'm worried about it. All I know is they're expecting him out there as far as I know, and I have no reason to believe he's not going to be a really good member of this secondary for them. And then they do have depth at safety. They signed Marcus Epps, who feels like he's played a million snaps. It's not quite as many as you would think, but he's been in kind of the starting safety picture now for the last 5 years. In Philadelphia and for the Raiders. His experience proves useful, but he's very streaky as a coverage defender, and frankly, as a tackler, he's been missing a lot of tackles in recent seasons. But good, just kind of balanced depth. I don't know if they have necessarily a role for him to get used in like 3 safety packages as opposed to him just being insurance if Duggar gets hurt or something happens with Peppers. But they do spend a 4th-round pick on Craig Woodson, who's very fascinating. He was a year 6 breakout at Cal where something really clicked for him, but he's a tremendous athlete. Not a great run defender relative to safeties because he's built more like a corner, around 6'200". Not that there aren't safeties that can play at that size, but I'm very interested to see how they use him because like he's got range. He can play that sort of Devin McCourty role as your true free safety because Duggar and Peppers are excellent around the box, and Vrabel, along with many coaches in this Belichick system, have really enjoyed 3 safety packages. And especially if Marcus Jones gets hurt, I would almost certainly bet that it is going to be either Duggar or Peppers as your kind of nickel defender, with Craig Woodson as more of the free safety. But at the same time, he's been getting some reps, it sounds like, as that nickel corner early in camp, potentially competing with Marcus Jones straight up for the slot corner position, which, like, I don't think Craig Woodson had, like, box safety size, but he would be good size for a slot corner. So if he can clean up some of that tackling inconsistency, there could be something there. And he certainly has the athleticism to be a slot corner. So, there very much could be something there. I didn't fully know what to do with Craig Woodson as a prospect because of the whole sixth-year breakout thing at a defensive back position that is streaky to begin with. But the dude can clearly move, and a fourth-round pick isn't nothing. So he, if anybody has a chance at kind of surprising out of the depth, he's probably it. I do think you got to keep an eye on Del Pettis as well, who stepped in when Peppers was suspended last year, and he played very valiantly in that big safety role. Had some good moments covering tight ends and some really good moments as a run defender, frankly. So he's a very good backup to have for both Duggar and Peppers because he brings a similar skill set with his size. They got Jalen Hawkins around here. They might also view him as the free safety for three safety packages. He's got a little bit more range on the back end. And then you have Brendan Schooler, who's this team's like special teams ace. So it's a very crowded safety room. Everybody kind of has a different role, which is normal for a safety room. But I am excited to see kind of Vrabel's plan for this secondary for some of those dime and three safety packages, because there's certainly some potential for these different guys to get in the mix. And I do think both Duggar and Peppers are at their best around the line of scrimmage. But fun to finish on this team's best unit as we can wrap up their defense. And the Patriots defense, I think, is going to be really good this year. Let's be honest about that. Even though this team ranks 27th, the Patriots offense does drag this team down in the rankings and with the math and all that. But I've got this team as my 11th ranked overall defense, 5th in damn run defense, because that's just what Mike Vrabel does. And they've got plenty of bodies and talent to throw at the run. And then 16th in pass defense, really with the pass rush questions and just being okay at linebacker coverage. Maybe hurts them a little bit there, but this is going to be a fun defense. I really do believe that. And for what it's worth, this Patriots defense last year took a major step back. A lot of injuries, and Mayo just wasn't quite everything they were hoping for. I think Vrabel will be everything they're hoping for. You might be able to squeeze some games out, even if the offense is struggling. Like, you might be able to squeeze some games out 20-16, 21-20, 17-14. Like, that happened quite a bit in Tennessee. And even if the offense is struggling through that, that can be the type of thing that helps you build your culture and in time develops that offense into the place that they need them to be. And it's always a good feeling, heading into a year two of the Mike Vrabel era, feeling like you're in a good spot where you've won football games in the past, and then you're really building in to a 2026 season where I think this Patriots team can really make some noise. Obviously, I'm not in a spot where I'm projecting this Patriots team to be much of a playoff contender and be this super surprise team. I think there's upside for them to be in the mix if things go really well offensively, but I will admit, I do think they're still a year away. I would be pretty blown away if Mike Vrabel made this team a playoff team. But maybe we're jumping the gun a little bit here. We do need to talk special teams real quick. Honestly, I would love some feedback from you guys in terms of how much time I spend on the special teams here. Just listening back to a couple of these deep dives, I feel like I'm putting myself to sleep just reading numbers at you guys. I feel like if you're really interested in how the special teams formula calculated all of this different stuff out, it's all on the screen for you guys and the podcast listeners. Maybe just have to take some time to come to this section, but I'm going to try it kind of a different style here and just give you more of a snapshot version instead of vomiting all these numbers at you. But I do obviously have a formula that I'm plugging in a lot of quote unquote objective metrics in, being like PFF grades and stuff. But the Patriots come out 11th on special teams for me as well. So they should be very good on this side of the ball. It's, the rookie kicker is going to be a little bit volatile there, but Andy Borregales was a stud at Miami. I actually do remember seeing a good bit of him. And there's very good reason to believe that he is going to be a hit as a 6th-round pick. But we've said that in the past about the Jake Moody's and whoever that kicker the Bucs took in the 2nd round. It's, rookie kickers are a crapshoot a lot of the time. But Bryce Behringer, the punter, was a stud for them. Marcus Jones is one of the best punt returners in the entire league when he's healthy. So he gives them a good punt returner grade. And then, kick returner is a little bit more of a question. I think Antonio Gibson will probably play that role for them. He hasn't had a ton of success returning kicks, but I feel like he should. So wouldn't be surprised if he kind of breaks one off eventually. I feel like he's kind of due. Feels like his skill set is just built to return kicks. And in 44 career kick returns, he doesn't have a return touchdown. Maybe calling my shot on that one. But yeah, the Patriots are in a really good spot for special teams this season. They came out 11th. But we can really tie this thing all together here before we bring in Andre for our guest interview here. Just a recap on the strengths, weaknesses, and those big pivotal factors that could lead to this Patriots team shattering our 27th ranking here. Let's start with those wild cards, the pivotal factors. Year 2 of Drake May, Stephon Diggs, as we discussed, and then really just some of those health questions on defense, especially with Christian Barmore. But you do have some weirdness scattered throughout with perhaps some injury-prone corners in Carlton Davis and Marcus Jones, and then Kyle Duggar coming off a horrible season and that ankle injury, and Jabril Peppers and his last year's off-field drama. Like, you do have just some potential volatility with some aspects of the defense, but you do have some core strengths being defensive coaching and the secondary. And then your core weaknesses right now, I did still put down wide receivers. Obviously, if Stephon Diggs is awesome, I don't think the receivers will be a weakness. But even if Stephon Diggs is what it was for the Texans last year, you do still have some questions beyond that at wide receiver. So that's a group that really has a lot of work to do still. The pass protection, I still consider it some bit of a weakness. I debated whether or not to put it on there as a true weakness, but I am still worried that they're going to be able to buy enough time for Drake May. Any one of those pieces could go wrong that we talked about, and they just don't have the depth to fill in. And then I do still think edge rush from a pass rushing angle is a weakness for this team. But let's now take a look at this Patriots schedule and their Vegas over-under, as well as where my win total projection has them sitting right now. So Vegas loves this team. They've got him at 7.5 wins after being in very strong contention for the number 1 pick last season. And I think the Mike Vrabel factor is a big part of that, and I totally understand that. Mike Vrabel coached football teams tend to get more than 7 wins. Obviously, his team has a long way to go coming off of last season, but I do understand it. And on top of that, their schedule is pretty damn favorable. They drew the NFC South, which includes Carolina and New Orleans, who already ranked lower in this series. They get Atlanta and they get Tampa Bay. And to make matters even better there, the 2 games that I would argue are going to be the toughest for them, which would be Carolina and Atlanta, they get them at home. New Orleans, who I had as the worst team in the league, is going to be in New Orleans. And then they have to go to Tampa, which was a game that they were probably not going to win anyway. So that all kind of lined up well for them. And then their own division is probably the worst division in football, right? You get the Jets twice, the Dolphins twice. The Bills games will be tough for sure. And then the same thing happened with their AFC North draw, where the 2 best teams, and I don't think this is spoiling much for the series, but the 2 best teams in Baltimore and Cincinnati are your road games you were probably going to lose anyway if they were in Foxborough. But the home games are Pittsburgh and Cleveland. So if those games were going to be closer, you get a better chance of beating them at home. Also with their last place schedule, they draw the Raiders and the Giants. Certainly winnable matchups. So I do get the schedule and the Mike Vrabel factor. I mean, you need this team to win 8 wins if you're going to win that bet. And that just feels a little bit rich. I think if I'm trying to find value with these over-unders, the amount of questions on the offense just does scare me off. I think if just a couple things go wrong, you're still going to be in a pretty tough spot trying to score points to get to 8 wins on the season. But it's also not a team that I'm comfortable with this schedule betting the under on, even if my math does still have them at 6.8 wins, like that's rounds up to 7 wins. That's not a world I'm comfortable going against Mike Vrabel in this group. And that's just not a world I want to live in. Like, I want to cheer for this team. I want to cheer for a young Drake May and see this team turn things around, because I think there's a lot of fun aspects of this football team. But don't go anywhere. We are now bringing in Andre Weingarten, tremendous guest. Every year just brings awesome insight. He brought in some stuff that surprised me and changed my opinion on some things, especially as it kind of related to the Travion Henderson pick, sold me on that a little bit more. So you're not going to want to miss this. Andre used to work on the ratings at EA for Madden, has done some pro scouting, a fellow YouTuber, and a great friend of the channel. So welcome in, Andre. Andre, my good friend, it is so good to have you back. Always value your opinions on all teams, but Patriots especially. You are a very valued guest of this deep dive series, one of the originals. So it is great to have you. Let's get into some Patriots here. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about some veterans and your kind of scouting perspective on them, and some rookies. You did write up a Patriots kind of guide from the 2024 Patriots, which I definitely encourage you guys to check out. I don't know if you've got it pinned on your Twitter or what, but that was really cool. But first of all, I do want to ask you a question about the new coaching staff, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, and maybe what sort of defensive schemes we might see differently, what we might see differently schematically speaking, I should say, from Gerard Mayo to Mike Vrabel. They both have Belichick historic influences, but what are some differences you might see here going from last year to this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we look at what the defense is going to be, I think we need to look a little bit more towards what Detroit did in this past year. Obviously, there's a lot of overlap in philosophy between Mike Vrabel, Gerard Mayo / Bill Belichick, where he kind of, pulled a lot of that from, and Terrell Williams, who worked with Vrabel, right? So there's a lot of connective tissue between those three. I think the sub passing game is still going to be very dynamic and diverse. Vrabel really popularized the amoeba defense at the same time Brian Flores did. Flores did a little bit more man style at first. Vrabel was a little bit more zone behind it.
Elaborate on the amoeba style defense for.
Yeah. So
definitely, because I know what you're talking about, but for the listeners as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So amoeba style defense is basically where there are a lot of bodies all up and around the line of scrimmage. So it could be up to 8 players, if you will, 7 or 8 that are on the line of scrimmage, basically around the tackles. And you don't know who is going to be rushing and who's going to be dropping.
Sure.
So, it's kind of dictated by how many for the personnel. I think it's usually a minimum of 6. But you have defensive linemen who are standing up all over the place, even the nose tackle, even, the edge rushers. They're all standing. And so you can have guys literally just dropping back into coverage in zone, or you can have, a corner coming off the edge. It's basically to screw with protections
Right.
and to make the quarterback second guess himself based on what windows are going to be where. So Vrabel and Flores both really popularized that at the end of the 2010s in one way or another. And I think we're going to still see a good chunk of that, but I would expect a 4-man front this year. A little bit more wide 9, hand in the dirt from the edges, rather than the more hybrid stand-up edge rusher 3-4, 3-3-5 style. I think you're still going to see some 3-3-5, but the way this defense likes to operate, it's a little bit more big nickel, 3 safeties on the field, which the Patriots deployed plenty of, but I think they believe in it even more. And yeah, I would expect a little bit more wide 9 from the edge rushers. It's how they deployed Aiden Hutchinson and how they deployed at times Adarius Smith, James Houston in years past, Harold Landry at various points, giving them that ability to get that 2-way go. So there's a lot of things that they're going to do that's a little bit more attacking in that regard. I'd expect probably a little bit more zone coverage than the man coverage, which was among the most in the league last year. Obviously, the Lions still play a good chunk, and a lot of it is personnel based. Vrabel has kind of gone back and forth. When they were throwing monkey wrenches into the Chiefs, they played a lot of quarters.
Yeah.
And even spot drop cover 4 in that regard. I would expect plenty of that from them if they so choose. But this is a team that can play man coverage on the back end, and I would be very excited to see them do that because I think that's what both Carlton Davis and Christian Gonzalez do best. So
Yeah.
I think those are really the main differences, and I think the biggest one would be just the feel for play calling and situational football. Between Mayo and Covington, they just were in over their heads in some of those regards. And you could see it by the red zone defense. You could see it by the third down defense. Just too many busts, too many poor decision points on the play call that basically made them dead to rights before the ball was snapped.
Yeah. No, it definitely will not be a problem with Mike Vrabel. His just multiplicity and ability to adapt is what makes him so great. So love the breakdown. All right, let's talk a little Drake May here. I want to get your thoughts on kind of where he impressed you most, where he might need to improve the most.
Yeah.
Maybe one or two aspects of his game. We'll stay there. And then I got another follow-up question after that.
Okay. I think the areas that we can start with that really make him special are that he is a legitimately special overall athlete. Upper echelon arm talent, upper echelon short area quickness, good foot speed. Sometimes you could even say even great foot speed based on just how well he's able to evade guys and really turn things up. Effortless velocity with touch. You can kind of tell the guys who really have to wrench their arms and the ball is very flat getting from point A to point B versus the guys who can just launch it and still get the ball up and down with pace. I think that's the difference between like a Josh Allen and maybe a Deshaun Watson in years past. Like Watson could really rear back and fire it, where Allen just has that natural oomph to it and he still gets it up. May has that. I don't. His arm is not Josh Allen-esque, but it's close in the maybe the tier down. Little worse than maybe like Justin Herbert. I think that's probably a better comparison.
Yeah, maybe
there.
Like Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, there are a lot of similarities. When they actually faced each other, you saw a ton of similarities in their game. Just May was a little bit more of a modern version because he's much more athletic than even Stafford was when he was young. The competitive toughness is insane from May. He really stands in the pocket. He doesn't fall apart under pressure, both decision making wise and just overall feel. Sometimes he'll be too aggressive, and we'll get to that in a minute. But he really knows when to keep his eyes downfield, when to throw it away, when to extend, take off. A lot of poise in his game, a lot of calm around him and in general. Great leadership, great football IQ. I mean, I've broken down a number of his games, and you're looking at handful of times where he's not making the right read across multiple games. Like it's really impressive where he's opening up the right way. He's going through the progression. Sometimes he'll have to pull the trigger a little sooner. You're beholden really to your receiving core and trusting them in that. But similarly to what we've talked about with Jordan Love in the past, he trusts everybody that he throws the ball to, almost to a fault.
Definitely to a fault.
Right, when you're playing with players who are borderline, some of them even borderline backups at different times that he had to work with, it's hard to trust them in the same way that you would an alpha wide receiver. But he didn't hesitate to follow the play and the concept and trust that his guy would be there, and that got them into a little bit of hot water at times. But I think all of those things together were really, really impressive from him. On the flip side, he definitely still needs to grow, right? The post-snap processing is good, but it's not perfect by any means. The deep field vision, he'll lock in on guys on posts, on some of those deeper routes. He won't see the backside safety. He'll throw it to a guy who is even, who doesn't have the speed to make it not even anymore, which is not great. His base is, for the most part, good, but it has a couple lapses, especially after he's taken a couple hits. he will overcorrect his mechanics
Yeah.
in a drive. The big thing is that he doesn't let it linger to the next drive, which is really incredible. But
Mm.
if he can correct it inside the same drive, inside the same set of downs, that's the next step for him. And then it's obviously just pressing late in games, trying to do too much on a really untalented team.
Right. Totally. Okay, so I like to pose this question to some guests when there's a quarterback that we still don't really know exactly what he is yet, and kind of present the question of like, how good do you think he plays this year on kind of a bell curve with, he obviously is super traitsy, like a 99th percentile outcome for him is like, yeah, he just has a Patrick Mahomes year 2. And like that's just like that range. But I want to ask you, like, maybe the 90th percentile outcome, like a really good positive outcome. What does that mean for him? Maybe from a raw, like, statistical output, and maybe like where he ends up ranking as a QB as well, like by the end of the season.
Yeah. So that 90th, or, I'll even go a little bit lower. I'll go 80th percentile.
Okay.
I think 80th percentile, he establishes himself as the 8th or 9th best quarterback in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a rather realistic thing because I already view him as a good starter with win because of upside. And I think that upside could be realized very quickly because we already saw it. Just looking at my scouting report on him, the worst category he had was his passing mechanics, which was a 5 out of 7, which is already a good quality starter for his position. So I think that's your 80th percentile. I think the median is that he's around QB 14. And the floor is that he's still a win with player. That's probably around QB 17, 18. Maybe he gets hurt because, and he plays through it because he's really tough. And, there's a bit of a drop off, but the schedule is pretty light. You're not facing as many good defenses. And, I think the floor is surprisingly high for a player that a lot of people felt was more boom or bust coming out. I didn't necessarily feel that way. I thought that maybe Caleb and Jane Daniels were a little more volatile because of how high their peaks were and how inconsistent some of their flaws could be. But I just don't see really even a likely possibility that he's anything less than a top 18 to 16 to 18 quarterback.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think I'd probably put that number more in like the 20 to 23 range, like just a tick below, but it's also like that would be assuming like essentially no mental development, which is extremely unlikely.
Right.
Like that would be, if we threw out the 99th percentile outcome, that would be throwing out like the 1th percentile outcome is that all of the stupid mistakes and the rookie level processing just doesn't grow at all. But even then, like all of the improv stuff, like I think he probably, if you're making highlight reels of like the best like improv plays from the top 3 rookies, you might even put Drake May ahead of Jaden Daniels. I think you certainly would put him over Caleb Williams
as a passer. Absolutely. Right. Jaden Daniels' rushing ability in those situations really made the difference. But I will say, I mean, Drake May, how much did he run for last year? He ran.
It was a lot.
It was a lot.
Yeah. Jaden was special as a scrambler, though. That's for sure. I'm glad you brought me in a little bit on that one because you're right.
Yeah. Well, but passing wise in the scramble drill, I think May was special in that regard relative to his peers, even in his own rookie class. And if you wanted to expand even further beyond that, but like Drake May, the Patriots were like 14th in yards per carry. Without Drake May scrambles, they were like 23rd.
Yeah.
Like it was him.
And then what if you take out the week 1 game against the Bengals defense? What right? Like drop another 3 spots.
Yeah. I mean, it's like they were not a good rushing team because they had 4 starters go down on the offensive line. So if you have a repeat of that, I still think he's going to be better. Yeah. And I think he already was like in, the 18th or 20th best quarterback in the league at worst last year. Because obviously injuries and because of inconsistency and coaching firings and all that stuff. And that was in a literal worst case scenario from playmakers to offensive line to play calling.
Yeah. No, I was worried when they put him in, and he definitely did more than survive, I would say. I don't know. I wouldn't say he thrived necessarily, but he somewhere in between there, probably.
Yeah.
All right. I want to ask you about some of these veteran guys, or in some of these cases, they're year two guys, but Jalen Polk. I know we've talked a little bit about Jalen Polk. I thought that was a miserable draft pick when they made it. And at this point, I'm writing him off as like anything you get from him is house money. Where are you at with Jalen Polk this year and beyond?
So I don't necessarily, I did not disagree with you at the time. Um, and I don't disagree that whatever we get is house money because he is from the previous regime. And
True.
I think just inherently, he is not a roster lock because I think there are 4 wide receivers that are, and he is not one of them.
Yeah.
And I don't think they would cut ties with him at all because he's a really high character, really competitive player. We have not seen him in camp because he had off-season shoulder surgery. But I was pleasantly surprised with his film beyond the fact that he literally couldn't catch a cold, which was his absolute greatest strength in college, right? If it was one of those things where, oh, this guy couldn't run routes in college and he can't even get remotely any separation in the NFL, that's not going to improve necessarily. Or a guy has bad hands in college and then he has bad hands in the pro. It's like, okay, yeah. But he was getting open in a way that I didn't expect he would be able to. Based on that pre-draft process. I thought he really put in the work and he improved there. And then when the drop started happening, his confidence plummeted and he stopped getting playing time. And that was it for him for that season. So confidence is really hard to get back. I would have loved for him to be out there in minicamp and get some of those reps in this offense. Get a feel for, year 2 of Drake May, get a feel for Josh McDaniels. Obviously, he was still doing stuff off to the side. He was the only time he wasn't playing was during team drills. So he was working with Stephon Diggs a lot, which is a great asset. But it really comes down to, can he catch the ball? If he can catch the ball, he has higher upside than I thought he would have had, which I thought he would have been like low possession wide receiver 2, high position wide receiver 3. I think he could literally push himself into high wide receiver 2 category because he was getting open. Plus, he can catch. And like he was stacking guys vertically. I mean, this is not the player that he was at Washington. And he was able to do it in a way like he figured something out. And then it was just at the catch point, just panic.
Yeah. Sounds a lot like Dontavion Wicks up in Green Bay.
Yeah.
Let's shift to the defense a little bit.
Okay.
I only really have one question specifically about the players on that side of the ball, and that's the safeties with Jabril Peppers and Kyle Duggar. I was hoping you could just kind of briefly hint at I mean, there's no way around it. Those guys had really bad years last year.
Yeah.
So just kind of discuss what happened with those two guys and what is your hope that they will bounce back or not?
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely think they'll bounce back. Duggar, I think it was a high ankle sprain that he suffered really early on in the season. I think week 3, week 2, and he played through it. He just didn't look as explosive. That's really all there is there on that side. Peppers was the communicator, and obviously he had the suspension or he was put on the exempt list for a while, and then he got hurt when he came back. So the two of them so you lost your communication on the back end. You lost your communication at linebacker with Juwan Bentley. And they just didn't look the same when they were out there together. So I think you're going to see a bounce back from both of them. Peppers is one of the most scheme diverse players at safety in the league. I mean, he is a legitimate threat post half field safety. I don't know if I want him necessarily in and around the line of scrimmage at this stage in his career, but maybe they're going to want to do that, having him play that curl to flat role, which he is very good at because he's very good at his processing and baiting and understanding throws. I'm a little concerned about him from depth in the run game. Just some of the angles stuff with him.
Yeah.
Duggar is obviously sensational in and around the box. He takes on blocks better than most linebackers do, which is, I mean, he really is a pseudo linebacker with adequate man cover skills and decent in zone. But I would expect them to bounce back, and then you have some depth if something happens. Craig Woodson, kind of reminds me of the Imani Hooker role, or the more traditional to the Patriots, the Daron Harmon role early on in his career. Marcus Epps kind of will play a variety of things as a fifth, probably safety. I think Jalen Hawkins probably beats him out for safety four in that regard. But I think they'll bounce back. It's really incredible. They lost the most important player on their offensive line in David Andrews. They lost Christian Barmore to blood clots. They lost Jawan Bentley, their green dot, to a torn bicep in week 2. And they lost Jabril Peppers to the commissioner exempt list thing. And that, like, they literally lost their entire chain of command on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
Like, that's so rare. And it happened, and it all happened within the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season.
Yeah.
So,
and then you go to a rookie quarterback.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
pretty wild.
They were really kind of set up to fail. But I think the safeties will bounce back. Obviously, Pepper's getting a little bit older, but he's still really, really good.
I want to kind of wrap things up with some draft talk here, and just get your kind of takes on the biggest rookie draft picks here, specifically Campbell at the top, Henderson, and Kyle Williams, the wide receiver as well. Just kind of your thoughts as a fan of the team. What did you think when they made those picks? And then how do those guys kind of project into their future here?
Yeah. So I was very vocal that I did not want Will Campbell at that spot. It had very little to do with the player and had more to do with the spot and other players that I thought had higher upside in the roles that they were going to be playing. Like, I very vocally wanted Tet McMillan to be that true X receiver. Obviously, that was prior to Stephon Diggs signing, prior to Kyle Williams being there when he was. So that was a player that I thought was a difference maker in that spot. I have questions about whether Will Campbell will be a long-term left tackle. But I do not have questions about the fact that I think he'll be a long-time starter in the NFL, either at left tackle or at guard. And he's the type of person that Mike Vrabel really gravitates to. He had Taylor Lewan, he had Ben Jones. Ben Jones was such a...
Ben Jones was so good. I kind of forgot about Ben Jones.
Right?
He's like one of those tweets, like the name a forgotten NFL player. Like, he's a great answer to that. Yeah.
There's a great video of him crying with Vrabel after a game. I think he played through injury and they won a huge game. And I think Will Campbell will be that rock for him for as long as those two are in New England together. There's no doubt that he's going to be a good player, and he is a significant upgrade to what they had last year. Let's not jump the shark there. He is significantly better. So they have to figure out left guard, but I think that Will Campbell is going to be a long-term answer on that offensive line. Where it is, not sure yet. And then you have Trey.
Do you have a best guess? I'm curious, where you came in on the arm length stuff. And if you think he's a long-term guard or how much you think that impacts his game.
I think he's going to be a better guard. I think there was just a little bit of stiffness on some of the inside stuff, and I think you can kind of condense things. And a lot of the guys who really succeed on the interior have shorter arms because you have less room to work with, so a shorter punch is a lot more impactful. So I think he could be a Pro Bowler on the interior long term because he has good movement skills in general. He has very good foot speed, very good core strength. He can handle a lot. Arm length to me it's only a matter of if you're getting pushed back to the point where it's actually detrimental to you. If you can cut guys off at the pass, arm length is less important. If you have excellent punch timing and location, it's less important. Are you going to have trouble with long-armed pass rushers? Yeah. If you can account for that through technique and through your anchor, it's a little bit less of a problem. So I still think he'll be more along the lines of solid in pass protection on the outside, and because he's going to be such a good run blocker, I think it's almost a little bit wasted at left tackle versus guard.
Yeah,
But
that's fair too.
in the system that he's going to be playing in that West Coast style, I think there's still a ton of value there. So I think he's going to be a better guard if he makes that transition, but I think he is still a starting caliber left tackle.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's just interesting because like I've always pushed back on the arm length stuff a good bit.
Yeah.
Like I loved Zach Tom, I loved Slater and some of these guys. But he also has the shortest wingspan.
The wingspan is worse than the arm length.
Yeah. Like he's right. Isn't he the only? Will he be the only offensive tackle like under a certain?
I think it's under 75 or under 76. Yeah, it's very odd.
And then you actually did see it impact his game in college too, unlike guys like Slater and Zach Tom.
Right.
Like, I thought he did get pushed back quite a bit at left tackle. So
but he has apparently been working really, really hard with the right people. I think he's working with Duke Manyweather, and he's already shown tremendous improvement in camp. Kayvon Chason, obviously a very long.
I was gonna say against who?
Right.
Who is he matching up against?
Chason, Keon White.
Dietrich Wise and his 35.5-inch arms aren't coming around any day soon.
But Chason and Keon White are pretty big guys, right? Doesn't Chason have longer arms for his size?
Maybe for his size, but he's not like this bull rusher.
No, but he does use a long arm rush.
He does.
Yeah. So, but he did perform very well against them. So, there's at least some positivity in camp so far about it, and he's been keenly aware of his weaknesses and has been working for it. So he'll succeed in the NFL. It just depends on where.
Fair enough. Yeah, we see him pretty damn similarly, I think.
Yeah.
All right. So what about Travion Henderson? What'd you think about him?
So I was taken aback by the pick. If I remember correctly, there was no wide receiver that I necessarily wanted at that slot.
Right.
There was maybe an edge rusher. There was something there, maybe doubling up on the offensive line if they wanted to go that route. But when they took him, I said, well, they have Gibson. They have Stevenson, who's locked up through 2027, 2028. I mean, his contract is ridiculous. They can get out of it. But, I mean, he is under contract for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
He's under contract through 2028. Gibson is for another 2 seasons, 2025 and 2026.
Really? That was a 3-year deal for Gibson, or did they extend him?
No, it was a 3-year deal. And it's only he's only $4.5 million per year. So like he
was pretty good last year.
So Antonio Gibson has been top 5 in broken tackle per touch in back-to-back seasons. He is legitimately excellent with the ball in his hands. He's not a gap player, though. He is a full-time zone player. Anyway, excellent receiver, all those things. I'm like, this is a little bit odd that they would do that unless they don't necessarily trust Stevenson, whose salary will start to blow up a little bit after this season, just a little. He'll start getting into that $7 to $9 million territory, which he is not that. But they need a pass blocker. And I don't think Gibson necessarily is that. And Stevenson is okay at that, but he's not the receiver that Henderson is.
Yeah. And
then it really kind of hit me like, wait a minute. Josh McDaniels is one of the biggest fans of pony personnel. Pony personnel is term for 2 running backs on the field at the same time in the NFL. So here are some of the numbers. Last year, despite the fact that they had these 2 guys, New England ran that 2 running back personnel 0.9% of the time. Okay? In 2022, when Zamir White did not play, he played like 35 snaps, the Raiders played it 20% of the time with Josh Jacobs and Amir Abdullah. 2021 with Josh McDaniels in New England, it was 18.9%. And that was with Brandon Bolden playing a lot of those snaps. And in 2020, when they did not have a tight end, it was Ryan Izzo, Dalton Keene, and Devin Asiasi, the dark times. They ran it almost 37% of their snaps.
Holy hell.
So pony personnel is a staple of the Josh McDaniels offense because you can motion the guys out, you can dictate, and this is not even fullbacks. This is strictly 2 running backs on the field. And it's not H-backs, nothing. And they're doing it in camp, which is kind of what brought me back into that. That was like, oh, there's a lot of times when they're on the field together, this is what they do. So, they like the diversity of being able to line those guys up. You could put Henderson or Gibson in the slot and they can play. I mean, Gibson is a former wide receiver. He
Right.
runs routes like one. Henderson has vocally said, I am studying James White because I want to be like James White.
Yeah. It's good.
And he can do it, but he's faster. James White was not that speed. He was a little bit more agile, but he was not that speed. So, get good football players. And if you think he's a really good football player, which I think he is,
Yeah.
I think you live with that. And then Kyle Williams, I was really ecstatic about. So the thing that this team lacks is a field stretcher, just outright. It's not what they have. Even with Stephon Diggs now in the fold, he is not that. Tyquan Thornton was really the last guy who could stretch the field vertically, and that's really all that he could do. You saw it a little bit with Polk, that he could stack guys. You saw it with Boutte, that he could stack guys a little bit, but neither of them are fast, right? They're 4 or 5 guys.
Yeah.
Kyle Williams can legitimately win vertically. He is a guy who will be an X receiver because he can beat guys off of press coverage, off the line through his diverse release package, and he can make plays with the ball in his hands. And dynamic receiving threats is what that team lacked. It was really Demario Douglas was the only dynamic guy, and he is tiny, and he's not a vertical guy. He doesn't have the tracking over his shoulder to be able to make those plays. So now you have a guy who can win vertically in Kyle Williams. You have someone who can win at the second level, which in Stephon Diggs, which is what he has done his entire career. And his Houston film was excellent in that regard.
I was so surprised how good he was last year. I hope he can get back healthy.
Yeah, apparently he's already running full speed, and he already looks great. They're just being careful with him. So I love the element that Kyle Williams adds because no one else does on that team.
Totally. All right, real quick, doing this for every guest. I'm going to try to keep track of the record of our guests getting the overs correct. We've had, let's see, one over and one under so far. So it's set at 7.5 on this Patriots team. It's an easier schedule. Going over or under, you got to represent all the guests.
Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you very, very easily. I'm going over.
Woo!
So we talked about it beforehand, and I'm just pulling up the schedule right now. So the Patriots have 9 home games. They are favored in 8 of them.
Yeah.
They are favored in 3 road games. They are favored after, I don't think they were favored in a single game last year. They are favored in 11 of their 17 games this season.
You said me that. I was like, there's no way.
Yeah.
But their home schedule is extremely easy. So
yes. And I mean, their toughest games are all on the road. They face Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Buffalo, and Tampa Bay on the road.
All games they would probably have lost at home anyway. So
yes, exactly. Yeah. Right. Like they're playing at home the Raiders, the Steelers, the Panthers, the Browns, the Falcons, the Jets, the Giants, the Bills, and then Miami in December.
That's a good time to get them.
And I think their toughest game at home, outside of Buffalo, is against the Raiders, week 1. I think that's going to be their toughest. And it honestly, I think if they don't win 9 games, it's a failure of a season for them. With everything that they have improved at the coaching side, on the offensive line side, the weapons, corner 2, which was a disaster for them last year, and all the health. I mean, they should be a better team at everything. And they lost a bunch of 1-score games last year. I think they finished second in the division.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. Yeah, it's probably the worst division in football.
So. I think it is. No, I think the AFC South still takes that crown. I legitimately think 9 wins should be the floor. So just by default, I'm going over 7.5.
All right.
As long as Drake May is healthy. As long as Drake May is healthy the whole season, if he plays 15 games, I think they win 9 games.
Okay. I think I'm going under on it, so we can we'll make a little side bet on it or something.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, Andre, this was fantastic. Super insightful. I know everybody's going to appreciate everything you said. You hashtag no ball, my friend. So great to have you. Anything you got going on? Anything you want to say before we get out of here?
Nothing yet. I might have some stuff in the works coming soon, but as you mentioned at the beginning, I have that very large guide on the Patriots from the 2024 season roster. It was everyone on roster before legal tampering in the offseason this year. Their full scouting report after the 2024 season. If you'd like to check it out, it's totally free. It's my pinned tweet on my account, and
Great.
that's really it. I'll be on there talking ball and having a good time.
Yeah, Patriots fans, you guys are lucky because that is probably the only free source, if not just source period, of a comprehensive, like, professional grade scouting report on every player on the team. So it's freaking awesome. I've enjoyed looking through it as well. So
Appreciate
Andre, this
that.
was great. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.
So a huge thanks to Andre for all of the insight and for taking time to talk Patriots here. And a thanks to you guys for listening, for watching. Please do hit that like button on the way out. Make sure you are subscribed. Let me know your thoughts down below if you think I missed anything. And who do you think comes in with the number 26 spot in these power rankings? We will have that video for you guys within the week. But until then, cheers.